After stealing Vulcan's key, the White-Clad moved to unlock Amaterasu and unleash their long-awaited apocalypse. As infernal outbreaks surge across the Tokyo Empire and the Great Cataclysm unfolds, Company 8 and their allies become humanity's final defense, pushing their abilities beyond limits in a desperate battle for survival. Watch as our heroes awaken unprecedented powers in their ultimate confrontation. In this video, we'll examine how every moment builds toward the series' breathtaking conclusion, raising questions about the future and the fate of the world itself. Let's get started. From outside, Licht was calling Vulcan. Captain Obi asked about the status inside Amaterasu. Hinawa thought that Karen had a limit to the energy he could absorb, but Karen said he would end it. He said he wasn't wrong because he was at his limit. He had kept Haumea waiting, but he would now put an end to the hell that tormented her. In a flashback, he was underground looking for Haumea while holding a lantern. She disappeared from his sight for a moment and suddenly vanished. It wasn't long before he saw her in the distance, and when he called out, she was just looking down and crying on the side. Karen quickly approached her and asked how she was. She replied that it felt like her head was being torn apart. All the hate was in her head, which was why it hurt so much. He held her to calm her down, but she just hit him. She told him to stop worrying about her because she could hear what was in his mind. Karen replied that if it would help reduce her burden, then she should let it out on him until she felt better. Because of that, Haumea pulled the lamp he was carrying and hit Karen's face while smiling. Karen was already bloody, which was why Haumea's sadness faded away. She just kept laughing while repeatedly hitting Karen, who was just sitting and accepting it all. That night, Haumea had fallen asleep in her room, and Karen was just watching over her. Ero noticed Haumea has worn herself out and saw that Karen looked beaten up. She asked if Haumea had done that since he seemed badly hurt. He replied that Haumea couldn't even rest, even while asleep. The emotions of humanity kept pouring into her little head. And for her, the only escape from this was madness, cruelty, and joy. Ero asked if he wasn't Karen the Reflector. She thought he could absorb damage, but he replied that Haumea's violence was her pain. And if he can understand even a fraction of Haumea's pain, then he'll take everything she's got. Ero commented that it was nonsense. But for Karen, Haumea's pain was his pain too. He said that when Ero became a guardian someday, she would understand it too. Ero thought that everyone would break if they were on the receiving end of the collective unconscious. Karen said that she was born as a symbol of the Holy Maiden. Before, she also had a pure heart that could accept the wickedness of man. And even though she absorbed excessive cruelty, she still survived. Therefore, Haumea carried all the evil of humanity in her tiny body. He added that her holiness had changed dramatically over the 10 years since her Adolla burst awakened. Moving forward to when she had grown up, a White-Clad member called to her because it was time for Mass. She read what was in their mind, such as fear, dread, esteem, and interest. The White-Clad member tried to manage her thoughts because she knew Haumea will hear what she's thinking. Nevertheless, she couldn't help but be impressed because she had grown to be so beautiful. So, she was curious about what was behind her crown. Haumea followed her, which made her grateful. Upon returning to her room, Haumea couldn't rest because of the many thoughts surrounding her mind. The voices she heard wouldn't stop. Instead, they grew louder. But even so, she wouldn't let that affect her. She said she would just enjoy the wickedness. She just kept laughing, so Karen tried to calm her down. She was laughing and saying they should all kill each other. Everyone was funny, so they should die. While still laughing, she faced Karen and released her frustration. She said he was in the way and she was just taking it out on him. Finally, after a while, Haumea lay down on the floor. When Karen asked if she was okay, she answered that it was just a little violence, so of course she was okay. Karen sat nearby and Haumea spoke to him. She asked what he felt about her. Karen was surprised by her question because he hadn't thought about it. He faced her and asked, couldn't she see what was in his mind? Then he should tell her. Haumea blushed because of this, while Karen just smiled. She could only read one thing, and that was unconditional love. Karen was puzzled when she suddenly turned to the other side and became quiet. Back in the present, Karen was enduring all the attacks against him because Haumea had fought the darkness of that world alone. All of it was just so they could light up that star. Haumea seems to have a vision of what's happening. Karen hoped salvation would be granted to that planet and the darkness within it would be cleansed. Haumea could feel Karen, and she kept calling him repeatedly. She couldn't help but cry and couldn't accept what was happening. Finally, he had reached the limit of energy he could absorb. He was just smiling and said that Haumea could now handle the rest by herself. The scene returned to inside Amaterasu, where the key had been inserted. This caused a reaction that troubled Vulcan and Lisa. The Infernal, you said that everything would begin here. Outside, a massive eyeball could be seen at the top of Amaterasu. Captain Obi couldn't understand what was happening, and Maki wondered about that eyeball. Arrow thought that the Adolla had been linked to their world. She noticed the 8 pillars suddenly. In her mind, they were absorbing their thoughts, the thoughts of humanity. Everyone felt what was happening, and Dragon said that at last, it had begun. He said he was getting tired of waiting, and, truthfully, he was getting bored. He had only wished that Arthur would have been entertaining at least. Arthur didn't respond to this. Dragon added that he could feel the emptiness and despair. But Arthur insisted that he didn't feel any despair at all. Therefore, it was too early for him to give up. Dragon tried to stop him and prepared to attack him again. But Arthur wasn't afraid and was just ready for it. At the gate, heavy smoke enveloped the area because Karen was in flames. He thanked them for all the energy, which surprised Hinawa. In his mind, the energy that Karen had absorbed seemed like it was about to explode. It was likely destroying his flesh. Now, he would return it to them, Karen said. So, Hinawa called Maki, who got ready. Karen insisted that this was his final gift to the Fire Force. He exploded with tremendous force, and Maki controlled it. She thought to herself that it was just heat energy and she could still stop it. So, she prepared to control it. It was extremely powerful, and Maki just held it back using her ability. With the enormous amount of energy Karen had absorbed, struggle was evident on Maki's face. Hinawa praised her and told her to just control it, and he would be responsible for deflecting it. Maki was counting on him. He couldn't figure out how to put Karen's final attack to good use. But when he looked to the side, he saw Dragon floating in the air and got an idea. He helped Maki with the ball of energy she was controlling and thought of targeting Dragon with it. He used trajectory control and avoided it by deflecting it towards Dragon. It was so powerful that it hit and destroyed several parts of the buildings there. Fortunately, Dragon was in the air, and that's where Hinawa targeted him. Arthur was surprised that Karen had managed to create such an attack, and Hinawa thought that, Dragon or not, it would be impossible to survive after being hit by that. However, Arthur had a different view. He said that kind of attack wouldn't even scratch someone like Dragon. He didn't want to say it, but even with his new Excalibur, as he was now, their rematch would continue. He had only one thing left that could make him a true knight. Meanwhile, looking up, Captain Obi wondered what was happening to their world. What was happening to their entire planet? The whole empire was being engulfed by massive fires. And in that state, they couldn't determine how many victims there were. This was also witnessed by Company 4 members in the area. Captain Pan was troubled by the eyeball visible in the sky, while Karen asked if that was the Cataclysm. Their horizon was ablaze with fire. The civilians were troubled because that was exactly what was written in the scriptures. Just as written in the prologue, humanity had incurred the wrath of the stars, and the whole world was engulfed in flames. That was the day of the Great Cataclysm. Everyone panicked and thought it was divine punishment. Others thought that their world wouldn't last much longer. In the middle of that chaos was Huoyen. He mentioned about the blazing flames in the scripture. The fury that was written consumed the land where humanity lived, their words, and the culture they built for themselves. Kongeo approached him and asked where they should evacuate the people. He answered that they should take them somewhere safe. Kareem couldn't believe what he said. He asked if there was still such a place on that planet. He was curious if this was the world that Rekka had wished for. He couldn't believe that this was the world he aspired to and the path he believed in. Meanwhile, back outside Amaterasu, Company 8 members couldn't see anything but smoke from the fire. Tamaki asked if that attack had finished off the Infernals. Captain Obi thought that, for the time being, it seemed that way. On the ground, Ogun asked if the white-clad scheme, the Cataclysm, had been averted. Tamaki was crying because they couldn't overcome Karen's conviction. Vulcan then came out to look for you, and Licht appeared before him. He repeatedly asked where you was, and Vulcan answered that they hadn't noticed from there. Lisa was shocked by what was happening. She called Arrow, who said that was exactly the result of what they had planned. Licht said the unification had begun. The worlds of perception and reality had become one, and almost half of the entire planet was already engulfed in flames. The 8 pillars and the collective unconscious they represented could be seen, such as madness, passivity, apathy, rage, destruction, fear, disgust, and despair. Haumea said that was the collective unconscious of humanity that she had been hearing until now. The only hope that existed in the world was resignation, otherwise called optimism. But for her, there was no such thing as real hope. Everything in that world, from people to the stars, was headed to destruction the second it comes into being. She asked them to imagine it for a moment. Imagination creates and erases all possibilities. So, they should continue and end that story. After all, despair wasn't a particularly special thing. In Tokyo, the fire force members were busy evacuating the panicking citizens. They were trying to calm them down to ensure a safe evacuation. Nevertheless, some of them thought it was already too late. Their world was over. His colleague called him an idiot. He shouldn't give up. He replied, asking what else they could do now. He said this was the end. Suddenly, an infernal that looked exactly like him appeared before him. The infernal attacked him, and the fire force member was stunned and couldn't fight back. His colleague was troubled, but it was too late. Captain Pan and others saw what happened and wondered what it was. His colleague was shocked because they looked identical. It turned out to be a doppelganger. In the midst of chaos, as flames envelop the world, Joker can be seen on top of a building. Upon noticing the burning surroundings, he realizes that this is despair. He tells Burns that he now sees it. Through his eyes, he can see Adolla. He can see the rules of that world. And there is only one person capable of rousing people up. On the other side, Captain Hibana is questioning what the giant eyeball in the sky is. She wonders if others can see it too. Conehead calls to her, saying that the situation she's researching is also flaring up in the fifth. Hibana is puzzled by this statement, and he mentions doppelgangers. Meanwhile, a fire force member requests assistance from the Fifth Angels 3. However, they too are troubled because the world is about to end. They're suddenly shocked when their infernal doppelganger appears, suggesting she should step in. And like what happened earlier, the infernal attacks the Fifth Angels 3. A firestorm engulfs the surroundings, and Maki notices that it's not like the firestorm they stopped before. Tamaki asks Licht if there's anything they can still do. He ponders and says that he needs to figure out what's causing flames of such magnitude. Suddenly, Joker jumps in front of them, revealing its despair. Licht is very surprised and asks if he has figured out the answer. Joker says that if they want to know the reason for the world burning, it's the negative emotions of humanity: madness, passivity, apathy, rage, destruction, fear, and disgust. When all these are combined, he says, they end up in despair. He adds that since antiquity, the evangelist has been planting these ideas in people's minds to return to the great flame of fire. Therefore, humans desire death as the final outcome of evolution, and humanity's perception of despair provides the energy for the cataclysm. Licht thinks about what Joker said. He couldn't believe that humanity's despair is covering the planet with flames. He then realizes that Arrow had previously mentioned the White-Clad's fear of Shinra becoming a hero. And so he questioned if that meant the existence of a hero could potentially stop the cataclysm. Captain Obi listens to this and reflects. Licht exclaims, "Oh my God," when he realizes that humanity's image of despair is crucial to the cataclysm. When Tamaki asks what this means, he responds that, as Joker said, the flames are fueled by human despair. Arrow adds, just as Commander Sho said, don't lose hope. Licht insists that in their current predicament, as absurd as it sounds, hope is the only thing that can extinguish that fire. Vulcan asks if he's sure about that. Licht insists that mentioning such fantasy-like concepts is extremely difficult for scientists like him. However, if they view the world from the perspective of a past age, wouldn't people think they were merely an elaborate fantasy? Captain Obi states that Company 8 stands with Licht, so they should spread this information to other companies. He smiles and says, "Don't lose hope." Joker smiles and mentions that he doesn't think they need him there. Hinowa calls his captain humanity's light. He says that the captain should just show them the way, and wherever he goes, they will follow. Obi appreciates Hinowa and that he can always count on him, and so he thanked him. Captain Obi mentions that Company 8 doesn't roll with despair. They respond with, "Sir, no sir." The captain then orders Vulcan to contact the other companies, and Vulcan complies. Joker remarks that their call will give strength to other Fire Force members. He responds that even if it's just a little strength, it will go a long way. Therefore, they should leave it to Obi. Vulcan therefore busies himself trying to find a way to communicate with the other companies. Someone then approaches and calls him, then corrects himself and calls him Merlin, which surprises him. It turns out to be Arthur, who acknowledges that he made the true Excalibur for him. However, due to his power as it is, it was nothing but disappointment for Dragon. Vulcan is surprised when Arthur admits how frustrated he is, so he asks for his wisdom. Vulcan stands up and says he will do whatever Arthur needs. He just has to say what it is. Arthur replies that he should join his side. They should venture to the promised land of the Eight. The scene shifts to what appears to be outer space. It's Dragon, who realizes he's extremely far from Earth, but he says he doesn't feel like returning. He wonders if he should just drift away like that. Perhaps he should just float in the sky and become a star. He thinks that wouldn't be bad. He's very close to the moon and thinks that nothing matters anymore. However, he remembers Arthur and his eyes. He wonders how Arthur can look at a dragon like him and not feel despair. This makes him laugh and consider returning to Earth for him. Back to Licht, he thinks about the moon and the madness it represents, as well as the giant eyeball and despair. He wonders how he can understand the structure of their world at this stage. Meanwhile, someone calls Captain Pan and says that firestorms are forming around them. Doppelgangers are also starting to appear. He responds that the safety of the people is their highest priority. He wonders what they should do in hopeless times like these. Objects are flying around in the air because everything is being sucked into the firestorms. As a result, buildings are collapsing, so they're evacuating people. Switching to Company 2, they finally locate Captain Honda. As he emerges from the water, he asks for a status update. Someone tells him that, as a result of the cataclysm of immeasurable proportions, the entire empire is in chaos. As he can see, the situation is bleak. When he looks up, he notices the huge eyeball and is shocked. He wonders what's happening to the world, thinking it's all over for them now. In his opinion, it's hopeless to try to recover the empire at this point. Other Special Fire Force Company members are also troubled. Even the captain of Company 6, Captain Huang, can't believe the number of casualties. It's an emergency, and they don't have the capacity to accept more patients. The firestorms continue to wreak havoc, sucking in objects around them, like cars, trees, and more. Pan then remembers Captain Agu saying that even though they're fire soldiers, they're powerless to stop it. He wonders if there's anything they can still do in their current situation. Someone rushes to him, reporting that they're receiving a transmission for the entire fire force. So he orders to patch him in immediately. Back at Company 8, Captain Obi thanks Vulcan for his help. He radios in and introduces himself as the captain of the Eight. He says that what he's about to say might sound absurd, but they need to believe him. There is a way to stop the cataclysm. The other Special Fire Force members listen as he says that the fuel for the fire consuming their planet is humanity's despair. And the only thing they can do to extinguish the flames is to drown out the despair and give hope to the citizens of the Empire. He encourages them and tells them that now is the time for the Special Fire Force to serve as exemplars for the people. There is still hope left, and because of what he said, Captain Pan smiles. Obi tells everyone not to lose hope. He wishes the best of luck to all companies. The scene shifts to the seventh pillar, Sister Sumi-Rei, who says it's deplorable. She says, while upside down, that there are still people who don't surrender to hopelessness even though the world is being devoured by fire. Because of this, she's reminded of what happened during the previous Great Cataclysm, 250 years ago, in a world that looked very different from now. Before the Great Cataclysm, she was Sumi-Rei Sugita. Her human form is shown, and she served the evangelist 250 years ago. The evangelist showed her the necessity of instigating the Great Cataclysm. In a flashback, she was excited when it began and when the preparations were completed. As the Great Cataclysm approached, they were ready to rewrite the rules of that world. On that planet, there had been many cataclysms over the years. The very birth of intelligent life on that world was due to a great cataclysm that happened a long time ago. Humans, who are the peak of intelligent life, were born. and their collective unconscious consented to a single desire, the same one where stars and all life reach a conclusion. Everyone desired death. The endpoint of life's evolution is extinction, and the driving force behind converting the planet into a sun and the destruction of everything through the final great cataclysm is despair or hopelessness. She says there's no such thing as humans with independent will. Everyone is carried away by either religion or government. Throughout the ages, even though people think they decide of their own free will, in the end, the target of their worship has simply changed. At that time, people believed in TV and the internet like a religion. They were mindlessly carried away by trends they saw. People worshipped meaningless opinions on social networks and were swayed by trends and gossip without stopping to think for themselves. She adds that the country had many atheistic people, and because of that, had no spiritual root. As a result, it was easier for the collective unconscious to develop and flow through people. Because of this, the evangelist chose Japan. It was an easy country to instill the evangelist's guidance and become the source of the planet-destroying cataclysm. Sumire took out her phone and, while scrolling, said that if you look at social media, you'll notice that people are carried away by perpetuating trends, hoaxes, and meaningless booms. They cluster around what's popular, just like bugs. If you look at your phone screen, she says, you'll see it too. There are so many bugs here and there. It's hard to imagine that these intelligent life forms evolved from past cataclysms. But if they can get enough brainless bugs, then their preparations will be ready. Sumire smiles and mentions that finding brainless fuel is the easy part. Only 2 cataclysms remain before mankind's extinction. She then invites to head towards a significant checkpoint on the path to destruction. In the cataclysm, the planet will become a world of flames and spontaneous human combustion. Sumire smiles because of this. Back to the present, people were rushing to evacuate. Everyone was ordered to take shelter due to flying metal sheets and various objects. A mother and child who were running hurriedly were about to be hit by a metal sheet, but fortunately Captain Obi came to the rescue and blocked it. He pointed to a nearby shelter and asked for the child's name. The child answered Tatsudo. Obi spoke to him and said that as long as the fire soldiers were there was no reason for them to lose hope. The child was delighted to hear this. In another area, Maki controlled the flames that were about to hit some elderly people walking. She said that while there was still time, they should evacuate. As they were running, she told them all not to lose hope. Hinawa reported to Obi, and in his opinion, they had managed to evacuate the area. Obi knew that all they could do now was turn their despair into hope. Joker was impressed by their teamwork. While observing, Licht thought that theoretically, as people's despair decreased, the flames should also subside. When he paused, Joker asked what the problem was. When he looked around, he noticed that the fire around them didn't seem to be disappearing or even decreasing. Exactly, Licht replied. Because of this, Joker became concerned as well. He said there was a cruel thought bothering him. According to him, everything in that world had worth, and that's what he tried to believe as a member of the Eighth. But Joker said that only the worthless were being carried away, which was worsening and feeding the fire. According to Licht, that world was full of brainless fools, and the brainless were only fueling that fire for whoever set it in motion. While staring at the blazing fire, he said that he now somehow understood. And when asked if Joker felt the same way, he said yes. Licht now understood the structure of the world, or rather, their story. Now he could see it. Meanwhile, Kareem prepared and brought out his weapon. After the tune-up done by Company 8's engineer on his pipe gun, he knew he could turn those firestorms into ice. He used his thermoacoustic refrigeration ability to collect heat energy into his instrument and convert it into sound that would decrease its temperature. He thought this would be enough to slow down the damage. Meanwhile, Karin from Company 4 used his scale shield ability to create hexagonal flame shapes as shields to protect the citizens. Captain Pan praised him for his good work, causing him to express gratitude. Pan said that saving people would give them hope. Suddenly, there was an extremely powerful explosion not far away. A member of Company 4 emerged from the smoke. When Captain Pan asked if he was okay, an axe appeared targeting his head. He was bleeding when the perpetrator pulled out the axe and collapsed and died. Captain Pan couldn't believe what he was seeing. This was because Captain Agu was standing in front of him. He quickly slashed at him, and in his extreme shock, Pan couldn't retreat immediately. As a result, he was hit in the body. Karin became concerned about what happened, but he said he was okay. The perpetrator said he saw something. Even Karin was shocked and couldn't believe who was standing in front of them. Captain Pan said it was a doppelganger. Again, he spoke and said he saw Agu. Back to Karim. He was breathing heavily after using his ability to turn the firestorms into ice. The people were pleased when they saw Company 1. They knew they could handle it, and because of that, they felt somewhat reassured. Huoyin thought that hope was gradually returning to the people. He just wished it would settle the flames. However, someone approached and reported that new large-scale disasters were popping up everywhere. Huoyin couldn't accept this. Meanwhile, the firestorm that had turned to ice glowed and cracked. It gradually broke apart and shattered, which shocked Karim and Huoyin. Smoke surrounded the area, and when Karim observed carefully, he couldn't believe it when Rekka suddenly appeared saying he had returned. Rekka returned, extremely enthusiastic, and said it had become so cold while he was gone. The two couldn't believe seeing him and wondered if it was really him. He answered that everything was good now that he was back. He even greeted them with good morning. Karim was pleased because that was the hot-headed Rekka. He was extremely happy to see him again, and Rekka replied that he felt the same way. However, a large hole could be seen in his upper body when he said, "Let's get hot-blooded again." Karim paused when he saw this, and though it hurts him to say it, he admitted that Rekka was already gone and had died. The person in front of him now was merely a shadow of his true self. Smiling, Rekka responded that was correct, but they shouldn't pay attention to that little detail. Karim was troubled because he was a doppelganger, a perfect image of Rekka. So he asked if it was really him. Rekka was curious about what he meant. He asked if he looks like the type of person who cared about small details like that. He was excited because finally, they had all met again. Him, Karim, and Huoyin. So together, they would destroy the world. This prompted Karim to ask if they really planned to turn that world into another sun. And Rekka didn't deny it. Karim asked if he was serious about what he said when they were in the warehouse. According to him, he was merely tricked by the white clad. Huoyin quickly attacked and approached him. However, Rekka avoided it. He said he should stop pretending to be Rekka. He was just a devil who came to deceive them. Rekka smiled because Huoyin was still as lawful as before. That's what he liked about him. He attacked back using what he called despair. He unleashed a series of punches and invited Huoyin to revel in despair. He continued until he released a flame that hit his side. Karim asked them both to stop. He told Rekka to listen to him and said he had only been tricked by the white clads. However, Huoyin said that was useless because this wasn't the Rekka they knew. Rekka replied that even though there was a hole in his chest, their memories were still engraved in his heart. Huoyin told him to be quiet. He was nothing more than a shadow of the real Rekka. Karim then questioned whether he remembered if Rekka Hashimiya was always a hot-headed asshole, or if he was hot-headed from the beginning and later became an asshole. He insisted that the evangelist exploited his sense of justice and lured him toward the path of evil. Rekka answered that he was one of the orphans chosen by Sister Sumire. From beginning to end, he didn't remember a time when he strayed from the path of righteousness. Huoyin said that his horrific actions were against the will of the Holy Soul, but he replied that he was a disciple of Adolla, and his prayer was the despair of humanity. He urged them to bring their hands to their chests and listen to him. They were probably aware of death. Until the end, there would be despair in everything they set out to do. They shouldn't be angry with him because he was just behind them and would guide them. So, everything would be okay. The two were troubled by what he planned to do. The scene shifted to the top of a building where several members of the Great Cataclysm Execution Specialist Force of the White Clad could be seen. They had been watching the events between Rekka and the others. Faerie said they should fight their former friends and despair. Whether they defeated Rekka or joined him, there was no option other than despair. Back to the Company 4 members, they were still facing Captain Agu. But Pan insisted that wasn't Captain Agu. He called him a heartless son of a He said Captain Agu would never kill his own soldiers. So, he ordered this doppelganger to get out of his sight. He was just a false image created by someone who didn't even know him. His very existence was repulsive compared to the Captain Agu they deeply respected. The doppelganger held the axe and yearned for Adolla, more and more of it. Because of this, Karin used his scale shield again to create a barricade. However, the doppelganger broke through it without any difficulty. This gave him an opportunity to counterattack. He tied Karin's hands and threw him around in circles. Captain Pan whistled, but the doppelganger just slammed his body against a post on the side and finally released him. Captain Pan attacked him, throwing him backward. But Karin said that without Ogun, all they could do was stay on the defensive. Pan replied this wouldn't be a problem, which puzzled Karin. Captain Pan prepared and said he would give himself a buff. He activated his buff, stacking by whistling. He knew it would strain his body, but he said he could handle it. He was determined to defeat the doppelganger of his former captain. Karin couldn't believe his plan. Meanwhile, Vulcan and Arthur were traveling. When Arthur asked if he was sure since their journey would be tough, Vulcan just answered that he would become a true knight and slay the dragon after all. Arthur suddenly asked what his plan was to do at the 8th. He replied that Arthur would find out when they got there. A few moments later, they arrived at the special Fire Cathedral 8, or the Promised Land or Shrine of Awakening. Arthur said an unprecedented trial awaited there. Arthur had already entered the headquarters of the Special Fire Force Company 8. He called it the Shrine of Awakening and noticed there was no one there. Vulcan agreed with this and remained quiet. They were going onward because Arthur believed if he overcame the trial there, he would become a man worthy of the true Excalibur. While walking, Vulcan called to him to ask something, and Arthur called him Merlin in return. Vulcan was curious about why he came back there now that they were in the middle of the cataclysm. He asked what exactly he planned to do there. He questioned if it was the right call. Arthur answered indeed. According to him, the path of the Night King led there. The trial would take place in the realm of good and evil, which surprised Vulcan. Moments later, they went to a room with a sign that read Shinra and Arthur. Vulcan thought this meant he was the good and Shinra was the evil. Arthur asked him if he had prepared himself for it. Vulcan was surprised by this question since it was their room. He didn't think there would be any problem there. Quite reassuring, Arthur replied as he grabbed the doorknob to enter the room. Inside, Vulcan was impressed because it was very tidy. Arthur responded that Shinra always cleaned there. Vulcan then expressed concern because he had suddenly disappeared. Arthur said that evil always endures, so he shouldn't worry about him. Arthur was fixing something, and Vulcan noticed he had been rummaging around for a while, so he asked what was going on. He answered that these were trial preparations. Vulcan was curious if this was the trial he mentioned, and Arthur replied indeed. That was what remained to be done. As long as the trial was incomplete, he couldn't draw out the true power of Excalibur. He declared that he would become the Night King there and now. That's why he needed Vulcan there. He asked for his wisdom. Vulcan didn't expect what Arthur was referring to. Arthur had set up a Super Nintendo, and this was what he called the trial. He inserted the Dragon Question game and started playing. Arthur explained that Dragon Question was a great trial prepared by the gods of Eld, and because he was inexperienced, his resolve was too weak to overcome it. Of course, the final boss was the dragon, the Scale King. He believed he couldn't wield the true Excalibur if he couldn't defeat him. Vulcan's expression was indescribable as he wondered if Arthur was serious. Arthur added that when he was alone, he couldn't make progress. That's why he asked for Vulcan's wisdom, calling him Merlin. He needed his help. Vulcan couldn't believe that the fate of the world rested on that video game. Nevertheless, he went along with Arthur's fantasy and responded in character as Merlin. He said that perhaps it was destined that he, Merlin, a humble servant, was born to provide guidance. While playing, they also had chips and soda there. After a few minutes, it was game over and Arthur lost. He was annoyed because the boss was only a pseudo-dragon, and yet, it was so powerful. Vulcan mentioned that it was indeed a stronger attacker than those Arthur had faced until now. His character surely wouldn't survive its attacks. While drinking, Arthur mentioned that even after upgrading his gear, he still couldn't defeat it. Vulcan ate and admitted he wasn't very knowledgeable about that kind of game, but he suggested using other abilities provided there, such as magic or buff or something. Arthur pondered on what he said about buffs. He remembered that Tristan had used stat buffs there, so he tried it. Vulcan added, he should try to focus on the main character. Perhaps he could face the pseudo-dragon attacks that way. Arthur seemed to realize something because of this. Back to the battle. Captain Pan used his buff stacking ability to enhance his physical strength and durability. He used fourfold berserk, causing veins to appear on his face. Karin was concerned about this. Once again, Captain Agu's doppelganger attacked with an axe, but Pan insisted that it was destroying his captain's dignity and called it a counterfeit. The two axes hit both of his shoulders. Nevertheless, he caught its arms and held them tightly. Because of this, he managed to break them. The doppelganger didn't expect this, while blood splattered from Pan's shoulders when the embedded axes were removed. He still managed to kick at him in the stomach before whistling again. He generated a whirlwind of flames around his fist and used the rending multi-stack drill. His attack was so intense that he pierced through the doppelganger's torso. As a result, his body was crushed and destroyed. Pan said that this wasn't Captain Agu. He was just a distorted memory that was there to hurt people. Karen couldn't believe what he witnessed and was impressed by this. Back to Arthur and Vulcan, they did a high five and continued playing with the new strategy. Because of that, they won the boss fight, and now they could move on in the game. Busy with the Dragon Question game, Arthur and Vulcan became troubled when they realized something. Vulcan said that their first friend in the first village turned out to be an enemy. He couldn't believe that now they had to fight their closest friend. The confrontation between Karim, Rekka, and Hoi Yin was then shown. Meanwhile, Arthur couldn't bring himself to press the fight button because of this dilemma. Back to the Company 1 members, Karim said he didn't want to hurt his friend Rekka. He pleaded with him to just return to Adolla as the shadow that he is. But Rekka only replied, hadn't he told them to ignore that tiny detail? Nevertheless, Hoi Yin pointed out the hole in his chest. It was impossible for him to be Rekka because the Rekka they knew had died that day. Rekka clarified that when that hole opened in his chest, he felt betrayed by his friends. That feeling was colder than the ice they had frozen him in. The hole in his heart was a hole in the heart of their friendship. Karim was shocked by what he said, but Rekka added that's beside the point. He only wanted to revel in despair together with the two of them. He wanted to end the world with them. He recounted how Sister Sumi-Ray chose him at the orphanage to help turn that planet into another sun. He was born to create supreme despair. Karim responded that it wasn't too late. He still had time to open his eyes to the truth. However, Rekka said his eyes had been open this whole time. His very soul was fully open to Adolla. Rekka then prepared to attack. Meanwhile, Hoi Yin told Karim that this wasn't a fight he should join. But if he didn't make a move soon, he didn't know what would happen next. Rekka attacked and released flames with his fist, which the two managed to avoid. Rekka said they had become cowards, and because of that, he had come. He continued releasing powerful flaming punches and asked if they understood. He didn't stop attacking the two while saying keep at it and go for it. Hoi Yin was troubled because they couldn't escape that. Meanwhile, Karim was just thinking. Hoi Yin suggested that the hole in his chest might represent Karim's guilt. It was a hole in Karim's very heart. And if he couldn't fill that hole with his own resolve, then they couldn't move forward. Back to the game, Arthur asked if it was okay to use violence. Vulcan replied that if he didn't defeat him, then they couldn't move forward. This was a chance for the player to level up, and there was no other way to escape it. Arthur was troubled because this was their friend. Flashback to the temple, where Rekka shared that he had a dream. When Karim asked what it was, he answered that he couldn't tell him everything about it, but it was a huge dream that involved saving humanity. Karim said he was sure he could do it and that he would support him. Hoi Yin arrived and asked how much longer they would chat there. It was time to worship. The two looked at him and just replied okay, before looking at each other. Back to the present, Karim remembered that Rekka always mentioned his dream. He prepared his pipe gun to fight and called out to Rekka, who was still attacking without stopping. Karim insisted that he would support his dream as much as he could. Rekka thanked him and said he really was his best friend. Karim readied his weapon, and Rekka paused. Karim asked if this was how he envisioned his dream. He couldn't call this saving the world. He added that it was wrong. Rekka had initially wanted to save humanity, but when he met Sister Sumi-Ray, he was deceived. Rekka responded that his feelings had been consistent from the beginning. There was no deception. Because of that, Karim said that until the end, he thought he couldn't understand people's feelings. He used his ability to counterattack Rekka and turn the flames around him into ice. He said that no matter how big his dream was, he couldn't give in to despair. Rekka shattered his ice and was annoyed by what he did. They called each other by name. Back to Arthur, he pressed the button on his joystick to attack, and Vulcan said there was nothing he could do now but continue. The scene shifted to a fired-up Rekka. He used his ability to generate flames, saying that's what he liked about his friend. Hoi Yin was alarmed by the fire he released. Kanyengo noticed him and called out. Hoi Yin insisted that she stay away, but Kanyengo asked if he wasn't going to help. Initially, he felt he should help, but this was a battle to give people hope. If a fire soldier like Kareem couldn't handle hope, how could he save people? Nevertheless, he became concerned for Kareem when the extremely powerful fire spread. He shouted that the three of them were inseparable and always pushed each other. No one could replace any of them for him. However, Rekka was gone now. He added that Kareem was more important than Rekka, who was no longer there. And he wanted this for him too. He wanted him to value himself, so he could continue to move forward. Meanwhile, Kareem brought out his bell to create noise that could reduce heat and collect it for his instrument. Rekka charged at him and tried to burn him. However, Kareem created numerous ice walls between them. Unfazed, Rekka destroyed them with a single punch. Kareem's ice shattered, and Rekka reminded him that they used to train together, and he would blast through the ice Kareem created. That's right, Kareem answered, as he used the bell again. Rekka raised his hand when he saw Kareem prepare to use the storming snowstorm of snow. Rekka was impressed and said he was still the same old Kareem. He was sucking the warmth out of the room. Nevertheless, he wouldn't lose. He prepared to release an extremely powerful flame using his shockwave attack. Kareem blocked it using his bell and captured the flame. The confrontation between the two was intense. The scene shifted to Kareem asking if Rekka could hear him. Rekka answered yes and said he wouldn't miss any word he would say. Kareem insisted that the two of them had something in common. Whether they were fighting or talking about their dreams, they always met each other head-on. Exactly, Rekka answered. Whatever they did, they always clashed with full force. Kanyengo was being swept away at the side. She noticed that Rekka's flames were too hot to freeze, while Huiyin was quietly observing. Rekka asked Kareem what he thinks of it. Those flames represented his dream of despair and belief. Kareem replied that, in the end, he couldn't support his dream. Gradually, Rekka's flames crackled and froze, which shocked him. Kareem used his pipe gun and said their friendship was real, just like Rekka's hot-blooded attitude and sense of justice. Rekka was now covered in ice, and the flames around him were frozen. Kareem insisted that even though he never learned the truth and ended up betraying his dream, their friendship would not be shaken because it was a genuine friendship. And that was good enough. He said this with a smile, and Rekka agreed. The hole in Rekka's chest was filled with ice, and his body slowly stiffened. Rekka hadn't expected Kareem to betray him. He admitted feeling guilty about keeping secrets from them. Because of that, it felt like there was a hole in his heart. But because their friendship was real, he filled that hole. Kareem thanked him for this. As Rekka completely turned to ice, he said it was always like this. The hotter he burned, the more Kareem cooled him down. He shouted loudly until he gradually shattered and broke apart in front of Kareem. Huiyin and Kanyengo witnessed the event, and Kanyengo couldn't believe it. She asked Huiyin if that was okay, but Huiyin couldn't respond. Kareem approached them, and they just stared at the vanished Rekka. Kareem said he had to kill Rekka for the second time. So, he questioned if that was all there was for him. Huiyin replied that was the answer they both came up with. Back to Arthur, he became sad because he couldn't accept that he defeated his best friend in the game just for world peace. Vulcan cheered him up, saying what he did was right and he defeated him. Nevertheless, in his mind, he thought that the world was literally about to end. He wondered what they were doing there. In the next scene, Arthur had reached the Dragon Lord's castle, and before entering it, he thanked Vulcan, who said it looks like they have finally made it. They were in the final chapter, the Dragon Lord, and according to the game's narration, the hero's party had reached the Dragon Lord's castle. Arthur and Vulcan were serious, and Arthur was fully engaged, gripping his controller firmly. Then, the game announced that the hero's final battle would begin, and Arthur said he couldn't have reached so far without Vulcan, so he replied that he was happy to help. Arthur added that he was truly grateful that Vulcan accompanied him so far, which made Vulcan wonder what he had gotten himself into. According to Arthur, Vulcan wasn't just a good colleague, but a good person for being cool in such a crazy situation. Vulcan wondered what Arthur was referring to, who added that he couldn't help but think about you, which suddenly stunned Vulcan, as he remembered the child who was controlled by Giovanni. Vulcan's fist balled up, while Arthur asked if they didn't know where you was, and said they should do something about that, because you was their ally after all. Vulcan relaxed because of this, and said he remembered the day you came to his workshop as if it were yesterday. It was some time after Giovanni dealt with his father and grandfather, and from then on, you would show up every day asking if he would take an apprentice. Every time you asked if he could take him as an apprentice, he would grin while tightly holding his toy. Vulcan added that for the longest time, he thought you was just a good kid doing it for fun, but one day when he was about to leave for town to get supplies, he saw him on the street wrapped in a blanket. He asked around, and apparently, Yu's parents had died in a fire. Usually, orphans were taken in by Holy Soul-run orphanages, but you didn't want to go to one of those. What kept you going wasn't Holy Soul, but a small doll made of odds and ends that he always carried. Apparently, you wanted to become an engineer who made things from junk, so he went to Vulcan's shop. On that day, Vulcan decided that he wouldn't take you in as a disciple, but as family. Even now, he remembered the smile on Yu's face, and soon after, Lisa came to his shop, and the three of them lived together. According to Arthur, the three of them became a family, so he asked Vulcan to tell him more. Vulcan said that Yu always imitated whatever he did, almost like a real little brother, and because of that, he promised to protect Lisa and Yu like an older brother. He said he was just a small engineer running a small workshop, but he promised himself that he would make them happy, but in the end, he was just a behind-the-scenes kind of guy. He wanted to be a hero for the two of them, like Arthur and Shinra, but he couldn't do it, and because of that, his tears fell as he was telling the story. He said he failed to keep the two safe, and he was angry with himself because of that. So Arthur consoled him, saying to leave it to him, as he would find a way to fix it. Yu, the dragon, and Shinra, wherever he was, using the Excalibur that Vulcan built for him, he would find a way. In the next scene, we move to Company 8 escorting people to an elementary school, and Maki was telling them to do their best to relax and not lose hope, because that would be a big help. The people were happy they could help, so some of them thanked everyone from Company 8. Maki said that the people seemed more relieved, so Hinawa said if that wasn't enough to keep despair at bay, but before he could finish, the scene shifted to the tornadoes. Captain Obi was looking at them while thinking. Then we moved to the soldiers, where someone was reporting to General Oze that the flames were not subsiding, and infernals were still appearing everywhere. The reporter also said that Captain Obi said that keeping the citizens in good spirits would help, but before he could finish, the general said he didn't understand why nothing was changing. After that, it was shown that Joker and Licht were talking, and the scientist said that Joker was right. In the end, most people were nothing but fuel for the fire for the person who set it in motion. He added that he couldn't help but feel there was a reason for helping the worthless mob who couldn't even comprehend the story happening around them, and they were just running in panic. Joker asked him if he thought the mobs were worthless, and he replied that no matter the era, civilizations were always constructed by a small portion of the people who inhabited them. On the other hand, Sister Sumire said the Fire Force was just wasting their time, because who cared about brainless insects? As long as the powerful people were in despair, the cataclysm wouldn't stop. Then, the scene returned to Arthur, and he was now facing the dragon in the game. Vulcan told him that he had done it, because it was now the final fight against the Dragon Lord, but he put down his controller, which confused Vulcan. He asked Arthur if he needed a bathroom break, and he said no, so he asked if he was still going to play. Arthur said his preparation was complete, which confused Vulcan, as Arthur grabbed his Excalibur and said that from that point on, it was his own cross to bear alone, and he needed to conquer the real dragon. Vulcan asked him why he was suddenly leaving, and he replied that he had something to take care of beforehand, so Vulcan asked if it was besides eliminating the dragon. Then he made him hold his Excalibur, which made him ask why. He ordered Vulcan to hoist the Excalibur toward the sky, and it would show where Yu was. Vulcan tried to say that he hadn't added that feature, but Arthur just stared at him, as if telling him to just trust him, so he asked if it was for real. Vulcan also wondered what Arthur meant by hoist it to the heavens, and he said that if he did that, it would lead them to Yu. Nevertheless, Vulcan argued that he couldn't do that, but Arthur said that Excalibur was a holy blade not only made by Vulcan, but by Lisa and Yu as well, so it held the love of all three, and it knew where Yu was. This made Vulcan think, and he unsheathed Excalibur, and told Arthur that he always said the craziest stuff, but at that moment, it seems like he being completely straight. Still, if nothing happened, he said it would be embarrassing, while Arthur said that a heart with love for Yu would light the way to him. Vulcan thought about that line, and at that moment, Excalibur suddenly glowed, which surprised him, and it was pointing a path for them. Vulcan couldn't believe that what Arthur said was true, and he said that according to Excalibur, that was the direction to you. Vulcan still couldn't understand how it was happening, because he said he hadn't added that feature. So how was it happening? Arthur said they would use teleportation magic to reach you, so Vulcan should hold on to him quick, who was confused by what he was saying. Then, Arthur commanded the spirits to lift them, but Vulcan tried to stop him because it was insane. In the next scene, Giovanni, using Yu's voice, said he had been waiting for this moment. He had been knocking and knocking while waiting, and he had even parasitized numerous young bodies waiting for so long. Now, he would see the end of the world with his own eyes, and at last, his deepest wish had come true. He said Adolla had made itself visible to his eyes, and he told the evangelist to hurry up and reveal itself to him. At that moment, there was a zap of lightning behind him, so he turned around and saw that Arthur and Vulcan were there. He wasn't happy to see them, while Vulcan was worried for you. Giovanni asked the two how exactly they got there, but instead of answering him, Vulcan shouted at him to give you back. He replied that he had become one with Yu's body, and as a matter of fact, he wanted to thank Vulcan, because with that body, his dream would come true, and it would nourish him. Vulcan shouted that it was Yu's body, but according to Giovanni, it was too late for Vulcan, because he had planted the parasite in Yu's brain, and they were now one. Because of this, Arthur realized where Giovanni was, and he added that he would only return Yu's body after he had witnessed Adolla, and of course, by then the world would be destroyed. But before he could finish, Arthur stabbed Excalibur into his forehead and said that men like him, who clamored for the tiniest peaks at the surface of the world, died knowing nothing in the end, so he should get out of Arthur's sight. After that, Yu's body collapsed, and Vulcan was worried for him, while Arthur said it was okay, because he had only burned Giovanni, who was nested in Yu's brain. Vulcan realized it was like a gamma knife, and Yu groaned at that moment. Vulcan and Arthur were waking him up, and he did wake up, immediately recognizing the two. Vulcan was overjoyed that he was back, but he didn't know what had happened. Then, Vulcan thanked Arthur, and said he didn't know how to express his gratitude. Arthur told him not to hold back his praise. After all, he was the Night King. He added that it was thanks to Vulcan that he had truly become the Night King, and for that, he needed to thank Vulcan. He also said that he had fulfilled his promise to Vulcan, and he had one more he needed to fulfill. Vulcan asked him if he was leaving, while Yu was clueless about the promise. The rumbling intensified at that moment, and Yu wondered about it because it seemed like the whole world was shaking. The world shook like that of a sputtering flame, and Arthur naturally understood the cause, and at that moment, the entire horizon lit up. Because of this, Yu asked if the world was ending, while Arthur said that dragon despairs. At Tama Bay, the horizon was burning bright red, and the source of those flames was clear. There were Fire Force soldiers reporting that all missiles had direct hits, while one asked about the target and how anyone could survive a missile strike. Then, Dragon appeared and called them all pathetic. The swelling and eruption of an undersea volcano seemed to be a manifestation of Dragon's despair, and Arthur said that the sheer despair of a powerful being like Dragon was spurring the world toward its termination. He added that he could no longer keep Dragon waiting any longer, who was asking how much longer he would make him wait, because he had gone to the trouble of returning to this world. He continued looking for Arthur, who said he was on the way, but Dragon was hurrying him. In the next scene, Arthur gradually disappeared, which surprised you. Vulcan told him that it seemed like Arthur had left to settle things with Dragon. Then, he asked Vulcan if anything had happened to Arthur while he was possessed, and Vulcan replied that he had played a video game. You didn't get it, and Vulcan added that he had only played an average Nintendo game. You asked if that was true, and Vulcan answered that Arthur had just finished playing an RPG on Super Nintendo, and he had leveled up to the max. You thought about this, and said he didn't understand it, but he understood the feeling, and it was like how he felt super strong after watching kung fu movies. He also asked if Arthur could handle Dragon, and Vulcan said of course he could, because he had Excalibur, which he had made. While the two were talking, the undersea volcano that had erupted on the coast of Tama Bay appeared, where Dragon was waiting for Arthur. Thunder reverberated across the land, and in the next scene, Arthur and Dragon finally met. The violet flash apologized for keeping the great dragon waiting, who asked him why he took so long, because he had given him enough time. Dragon also asked if Arthur had occupied himself while he was gone, but Arthur just grunted. This surprised Dragon, and he asked what could have happened in the short time he was gone. Arthur said, whether Dragon believed it or not, he had gained some experience as of late. He said he had battled to death with his closest friend, and many of his allies had died in battles against demons, and his village had even burned down. He said that after that grand journey, he had become the Night King, and Dragon said there were only a few hours left before the destruction of this world, so he had hoped Arthur would hold together until then. Arthur replied that this world would not be destroyed, and he would defeat Dragon and stop his despair, so the despair should disappear because he was there. Nevertheless, Dragon replied that he would be the judge of that, and in the next scene, Arthur attacked him with a lightning uppercut slash. Dragon was surprised by Arthur's speed and saw him with a very serious look on his face. Arthur followed that attack with another lightning mega slash, which sent Dragon flying backward. He was holding something on his cheek, and it was shown that it now had a mark. Because of this, he said so that's what it felt like to be hurt, and teasingly said it was interesting. Then, Arthur pointed Excalibur at him, so he told him not to disappoint him. He said he should continue what he was doing, or was that all he had? In the next scene, Arthur jumped to deliver a devastating downward slash to Dragon, and it hit his shoulder. However, Dragon countered by opening his mouth and releasing a powerful attack that sent Arthur flying into the air. Arthur really felt the power of that attack, while the sky continued to rumble. Dragon's attack was so powerful that it pierced the heavens, because Arthur went through it. He flew to follow Arthur, and while chasing him, Arthur activated the violet flash, causing crackles beneath Dragon. In the next scene, Arthur suddenly disappeared, and Dragon said that Arthur was hiding in the thunderclouds, and he had had high hopes, but was Arthur just going to hide out of fear? Arthur replied that he shouldn't get the wrong idea, because the thunder within the thundercloud was accumulating inside the Holy Blade. Then he used Violet Flash Descent on Dragon, causing him to bleed, but he was still smiling, while Arthur said that he got him. In the next scene, we are told that since ancient times, mankind has pictured a great beast amid the roiling, thunderous skies. In a land consumed by cataclysm, a land called Iraq in earlier times, also called Babylonia in the times before that, a lone boy appeared. He left unscathed, leaving only ashes in his wake, and the people who saw the child as a walking disaster named him Dragon. For years Dragon walked, trampling everything in his path, and what little remained of the world was destroyed, so what else could Dragon be called but a disaster? Dragon was calling something pathetic at that time, and we learned that Dragon shook the very earth, instilling despair in everyone he met, but no one despaired more than he did, and it could even be said that despair was all Dragon knew. Optimism, hopes, and dreams were supposedly for the weak and foolish. For Dragon, because of his absolute power, optimism was worthless, and that's what he called pathetic. It was also said that hope was non-existent in Dragon's reality, and he had no direction and no goal in life. In spite of his towering physique, he was like a lost child. With his unconquerable strength, his despair only grew stronger, and in that despair, in his boredom, he became a disaster again, cleaving continents and burning seas. In the next scene, Dragon was shown seeing someone in the sky, and he asked who it was. It was Faerie, and he replied that disaster was no stranger to that world, because lightning separated the heavens, and the earth herself was shaking. In ancient times, they even imagined that a beast was at the heart of all these, and they called it Dragon. He added that people couldn't hope to fight that beast, and they found themselves devoured by it, and it resembled Dragon. Then, he introduced himself as Faerie, and said that 200 years from that time, in an eastern realm, a great cataclysm shall begin anew, and for that, despair was needed. He asked Dragon if he wasn't bored living without purpose, so he should come with him to Tokyo, and there they would lay waste to that world and everything in it. Even though Dragon was in despair, he found a purpose, and he called Faerie a tiny insect. Then, we return to the present, where Dragon was laughing, because at that moment, from the violet flash that pierced his body, he saw a thin glint of light. Dragon said that Arthur had even made him bleed, and it was gushing like magma. So he praised him because he wasn't a pushover, and they could really start their battle. He added that this was his first actual fight, so they should make thunder, and he meant real thunder. And because of that, Arthur trembled. In the next scene, Dragon delivered a body bump attack to Arthur, and he was sent flying, bouncing off the clouds. Arthur was in extreme pain because of it, and when he tried to stand, he skidded far away due to the power of that attack. The battle between the two continued, and Dragon prepared his powerful breath attack, while Arthur swung Excalibur. Dragon attacked with a ray of heat lanced, but Arthur blocked it with a blinding slash. Because of the shock of that attack, the heavens was split apart, and it even hit the earth. Because of this, Vulcan found out where the two were. Then, Arthur charged forward, and Dragon responded with a double block, and he said that was the first time he raised his hands not for destruction. Their fight was a battle of the strongest, recognizing no limits, be it land, sea, or air. In the next scene, Arthur was swept to the bottom of the ocean, and Dragon followed him there. He told him that he was making a mistake by entering the water, so Dragon wondered what he meant. Arthur added that Dragon should bathe in the thunder of a night, but Dragon turned dark, as if surrounded by electricity. He said his claws and his power separated the sky, the earth, and even the sea, and that's exactly what he did. Only the two of them remained, because all the water was gone, and he said it was too cramped there. So he asked Arthur if he also thinks that the world isn't big enough for the both of them. But Arthur just grunted. As water flowed back into the spot that Dragon had separated, he said that Arthur wasn't as strong as him yet, as Arthur charged at him at that moment, so he charged back. However, Arthur suddenly ran away, but Dragon quickly caught up to him. They exchanged punches and slash attacks, making Arthur look worried, while Dragon was grinning. It reached a point where they were pushing each other back into the sky, and they seemed tireless in their continuous attacks against each other. In the next scene, Arthur delivered a mega slash, sending Dragon flying into the ocean. Now Arthur was the one in pursuit, and this was followed by a huge explosion. Because of this, they both flew out of the water and crashed, but they immediately charged at the same time, and it was clear they were intensely furious with each other. Then, Dragon attacked again using his mouth, but Arthur slid to the left. The attack resulted in an enormous splash in the ocean, while Arthur still stood firm. In the next scene, the ground where Dragon was standing rose, but Arthur still followed him, and he was grinning while being attacked by him. Arthur delivered an uppercut slash to him, cutting a part of his chest to left shoulder. Nevertheless, he grabbed Arthur, who was surprised, and threw him with tremendous force into the ground, which broke and sent countless small rocks flying. Arthur's body continued to bounce like a rag doll, but in an instant, he suddenly planted his foot and prepared to attack, which seemed to surprise Dragon. He released what looked like a laser beam attack, which went through Dragon's body and pushed him toward the sky. Dragon couldn't escape from that situation, and he was sent back above the clouds, quickly followed there by Arthur, who was ready to attack again. Arthur used a thunderous mega slash as his attack, followed by multiple lightning strikes, all of which hit Dragon. When another lightning strike was about to hit Dragon, he tried to punch Arthur, and his left jab hit his head, sending him flying and rolling. However, Dragon's eyes widened, because Arthur countered using the Violet Flash, Eightfold Strike, which sliced through Dragon's body. Because of this, a large hole formed in the sky, and Arthur was also sent flying due to the impact of his attack. He landed on the clouds, leaving Dragon in the middle of the hole, floating and covered in blood. He was bleeding from his mouth, near his shoulder, and also from his stomach. Dragon said that Arthur wasn't half bad, but he was just warming up, and he asked Arthur how about him. Arthur didn't answer him, which made him laugh, and he added that he thought he had seen everything. So what a delight this was. Arthur became alarmed at that moment, because Dragon began to transform, revealing his scales. His body was snapping into place and was surrounded by black matter. After he transformed, he immediately charged at Arthur and hit him with a left-hand jab that also had electricity. Due to the immense power of Dragon's attack, Arthur seemed stunned from the pain, and Dragon followed up with another powerful attack that sent Arthur flying far upward. Dragon immediately followed him, so Arthur tried to attack him using Excalibur, but Dragon punched it, causing him to fall quickly back to the clouds. He even bounced because of the extreme force of the impact, and the pain was clearly visible on his face. On the other hand, Dragon didn't waste any time and immediately charged, so Arthur tightened his grip on Excalibur and pointed it at Dragon to use the powerful laser beam attack again. However, Dragon simply swatted it to deflect it, and he landed on the clouds, which shook and launched Arthur upward. Dragon took advantage of this and showered Arthur with rapid attacks, and he seemed to be struggling greatly, while Dragon was thoroughly enjoying himself, taunting Arthur by asking him what was wrong. Then, he gave Arthur a powerful right overhand punch, and the impact was strongly felt throughout the sky, but Arthur managed to block that attack. Because of this, Dragon told Arthur not to disappoint him, so Arthur attacked, saying that Excalibur was just warming up too. Because of Arthur's attack, Dragon received a large slash mark on his body, and he said that was good, and it seemed that was the spirit he was looking for from Arthur. Then, he attacked him using his sharp claws, but Arthur jumped to avoid it, and was about to hit him with a devastating downward slash. However, in an instant, Dragon grabbed Arthur and flew upward toward the moon. Arthur was hurt by Dragon's sudden grab, and he stabbed his back using Excalibur. Dragon felt this and screamed in pain, but he said that wouldn't be enough to stop him. Arthur asked him where he was taking him, but it seemed Arthur quickly realized where, because Dragon was taking him to space. The battle for the world continued in space. While who could the man gazing at the night be? It was Arthur's father looking upward, but his hat was covering his face. Mrs. Boyle asked him if he had found anything new, but he replied that it was just the usual beautiful night sky. Then, he thought for a moment and said something about a prophecy. The prophecy he had seen was not about the world, because it was about his son Arthur. His wife asked him if he was sure, and he replied yes, and their son was currently fighting in space. In the next scene, we return to the battle between the two, where Arthur was struggling greatly, while all of it seemed to have no effect on Dragon. The two had reached the moon, and they began to crash toward its surface. Then, Dragon threw Arthur, so he fell faster and crashed just below the eye of the moon. Upon landing, Dragon said there was no one there except the two of them on that moon, so no one would interfere. As his body throbbed, Arthur was surprised that they were on the moon, and we are told that there is no atmosphere in space, and it's almost a vacuum, where temperatures reach -270 degrees Celsius. For most living things, it's impossible to survive there without a protective suit, and without one, the body would lose heat and gradually freeze to death. However, Dragon and Arthur were not aware of this, so they continued fighting, but before long, the Violet Flash realized something, because he could no longer breathe. He dropped Excalibur because of this and held his throat, which made Dragon wonder what was happening. Suddenly, Arthur was hit with symptoms of oxygen deficiency, such as headaches, nausea, lethargy, and loss of consciousness. Dragon asked what was wrong, but Arthur could no longer answer him because he was losing consciousness, and Excalibur's fire had also gone out. The Night King could no longer move, until his vision completely turned white. Dragon said that even the Night King was just a human and fragile. Seems like Arthur couldn't survive so far from Earth, while Arthur was thinking if that was the end. Dragon added that it seemed a whelp like Arthur couldn't dispel his despair, and he had hoped their fight would continue until the end of time. Excalibur finally fell to the surface of the moon, and Dragon just stared at Arthur, who was reaching for something in front of him. Dragon asked if Arthur was begging for his life by dropping his weapon, because he still thought highly of him, so he told him that he had disappointed him. He started walking away, saying nothing would stop him from leaving a whelp like Arthur to crumble to dust, so Arthur looked at him. Nevertheless, Arthur equipped the star ring, putting it on his right pointer finger, and stood up. He picked up Excalibur and figured out what the ring was for, so he thanked Vulcan. Dragon smiled because of this, while Arthur told him that he could still fight, and he would never be despaired by him. He asked him if that was so he put on his helmet and said that in that case, they would determine the future of the stars. According to Arthur, thanks to the power of the star ring, he could continue fighting, even in space. However, Dragon said that just because Arthur could breathe now, it wouldn't be enough to defeat him. Arthur replied that Dragon was assuming that was all the ring could do, which made Dragon wonder. Arthur explained that with that ring, he could turn the thoughts of people on Earth into power, and at that moment, his Fire Force gear was gradually being removed. Dragon said it seemed Arthur had finally grasped Adolla, and after that, Arthur's transformation was complete. All that remained of Arthur's outfit was his hood, and the left side of his head was surrounded by fire. He said he hadn't even begun yet, so Dragon replied while charging forward that they should begin. Arthur jumped backward to avoid him, and he parried Dragon's attack using Excalibur. Then, Dragon delivered a Mega Claw Slash, and Arthur countered with his own Mega Slash, but it seemed to have no effect on Dragon, while Arthur got wounded on the shoulder. As the two clashed again, Dragon said they should continue until that world turned to ashes, but according to Arthur, it wouldn't burn. He said he would make Dragon find hope through his strength, so Dragon said he thought too high of himself. Then, Dragon gave Arthur a fierce palm bomb attack, sending him flying, and resulting in a massive explosion on the moon. In the aftermath, Arthur got up and said that as long as he was standing, what he was saying was no boast, and Dragon should be happy that he was there. Dragon replied that he wanted to see Arthur in despair, and he would crush him. Then, we returned to Earth, to Asakusa, where Shinbita was asking Kurono what was happening, and Kurono seemed worried because he knew it was the Cataclysm. He told Benimaru that at that rate, Asakusa was doomed too, and he agreed, saying he had something to do. According to Kurono, doppelgangers were appearing outside Asakusa, so Benimaru mentioned that it was just like Hibachi, and they were awakening everywhere. Shinbita asked if they were lucky or what, because why weren't the doppelgangers appearing in Asakusa? Kurono replied that Asakusa people viewed things differently compared to Empire folk because they had their own ferryman. It was Benimaru, and Shinbita asked what Kurono was saying. Then, Kurono told Benimaru that he hoped he was ready, and he replied that the version imagined by the Asakusa boys was interesting because his doppelganger was coming. Kurono said that the only one who could defeat Benimaru was himself, so he jokingly asked if Kurono was saying that in other words, he might lose. According to Shinbita, Benimaru shouldn't tempt fate, because even if his opponent was himself, he needed to win, but Benimaru replied that whatever happened, he would be the winner. Shinbita got a headache from that answer, and Benimaru said that even though Tokyo was suffering, they couldn't do nothing, so they should prepare. Then, we moved to the giant eye looking at Earth, and we saw Shinra embedded in a pillar, seemingly in a sleeping state. On the other hand, Haumea was kneeling in prayer, surrounded by flames, and she was in front of the evangelist. In the next scene, we turned to Vulcan and Yu, who were heading toward the other Company 8 members. While on the journey, Vulcan was thinking about Arthur's trial, because no matter how you looked at it, the Night King was unbelievable. At that time, his trial had supposedly ended, and he was now fighting Dragon. But where was he? Because just a while ago, he had seen him fighting in the sky. Before long, they arrived where their companions were, and Lisa was overjoyed to see Yu again, hugging him tightly, while Obi thanked Vulcan for helping out with Arthur. Then, he ordered Licht to fill Vulcan in on the situation. So Licht said he was sure Vulcan knew that Arthur was fighting Dragon, and the result of that fight would decide the fate of the world, which surprised Vulcan. Licht asked him if he knew the old proverb about how each person's life is equal to another, and they are interdependent because of that. But that wasn't the case at all. He explained that the Special Fire Force has worked so hard to maintain that life, but it doesn't matter at all if it doesn't exist in the first place. Vulcan asked him what his point was, and he replied that in other words, there were lives that the world didn't need, because in that world, the most important lives were the lives of the establishment, which led their imaginations, and Vulcan was one of them. Licht added that even amongst the establishment, the despair from Dragon was a special case, and because the sky was pretty quiet, he couldn't tell if the two were still on Earth. But if Arthur couldn't dispel Dragon's despair, the Cataclysm would continue. The outcome of their fight would decide the result of the Cataclysm. Then, we returned to space, where there was something gradually approaching us. It turned out to be Arthur and Dragon, and that thing was the sparks from their successive attacks. Because of the explosions from their attacks, they were being thrown all over space. And at that moment, Arthur delivered a slash, but Dragon countered with a right hook, sending Arthur flying into a star, and he hit it with such force that his body bounced. Dragon didn't waste any time, as he charged again and punched Arthur with tremendous force, shattering the star behind him. Arthur's head even hit a small piece of the star, but he was still able to stand, and even jumping to charge at Dragon. He hit him with a mega slash using Excalibur, which damaged Dragon's headgear. Dragon tried to scratch Arthur in retaliation, and he combined it with an uppercut scratch, but simultaneously, Arthur hit him with a horizontal slash. A lot of blood came out from Arthur due to Dragon's scratching, while it was visible on Dragon's face that he was being hurt by Arthur's attacks. They continued to attack each other, so the explosions continued. At that moment, Dragon charged, and Arthur met his charge, resulting in a massive explosion that disturbed the silence of space. Both Dragon and Arthur sustained critical blows, as Dragon impaled his claws in Arthur, while Arthur had sliced Dragon from his shoulder to his chest. Arthur looked extremely exhausted from their battle, and they were at a standstill. But in the next scene, Arthur shouted with tremendous force as he backed away, removing Dragon's claws from his body. He had 2 huge holes in his torso, and it was obvious that he was in extreme pain, while Dragon was just grinning. He said he had never felt that before, and he could tell that they were both close to death, so Arthur shouldn't disappoint him before the end. Arthur replied that there was no disappointment in store for Dragon, and he shouldn't be afraid because he would defeat him. Then he attacked Dragon with a sword slash, and Dragon prepared to counter, but when he punched, Arthur blocked it, still fighting hard despite being severely beaten. Dragon tried to use a laser beam attack on him, but he saw it coming, so when Dragon attacked, he managed to bend over backward to avoid it. He barely avoided that attack, and afterward, he tried to bury Excalibur to Dragon's chest, but he managed to tank the damage with his arm. But Dragon grabbed him by the neck and slashed Arthur's face even at the cost of his hand getting sliced off, while he gave Arthur a large gash across his face that destroyed his right eye. Nevertheless, he stabbed Dragon with Excalibur again and swung it while it was embedded in his opponent's body. In the next scene, the two crashed, landing on the moon once again. Arthur was on top of Dragon, and the intense fury on his face was clearly visible. Dragon was still smiling as if he wasn't experiencing any difficulty, then suddenly gave Arthur a powerful headbutt straight to the face. But despite that, Arthur didn't falter and just said that if he allowed Dragon to despair, the world will burn away. In response, Dragon prepared to attack again, and it hit Arthur directly. However, he was still standing, and he said that the Night King would never be defeated, and he wouldn't let things end there. He said if the world burned, Shinra would have nothing to protect when he woke up. He explained that he had made an oath to save you, defeat Dragon, and find a way to help Shinra, and the Night King didn't break oaths. Dragon asked if Arthur really thought he could vanquish him and return whole, so Arthur took a breath and replied that he had promised he would return alive. Dragon said he was just being greedy because no one fought Dragon and returned alive, but Arthur said he had planned it from the very beginning. At that moment, Arthur shouted, and so did Dragon, and in the next scene, the two clashed again, where Dragon parried Arthur's attack with his hand and countered with his own attack. His attack only hit the stars in space, which exploded upon impact, while they continued fighting. Then, Arthur cut off one of Dragon's hands, but Dragon immediately punched him, sending him flying far away. Dragon knelt after that, while Arthur was lying face down from the pain, and Dragon told him to give up because he would die there. He replied that was probably right, and he immediately thought of the Press of Death he had learned in Asakusa, but it wouldn't work because the Press of Death was just an acknowledgement of death, and it wasn't enough to defeat Dragon. He said he needed a singular, final flash, steeled for death. Life, hope, and despair. The living live and ultimately die. What do people imagine that promised death is, and what hopes do they cling to? There is supposedly a way to quell people's despair and continue living, and then there is Dragon. For that person who had nothing, life meant nothing. And even if life itself was oblivion, even if that empty shell of a life would end, so that's why Dragon despaired. However, in front of the unrivaled Dragon, a person appeared who would bring him to the precipice of death. Dragon had now learned what pain was, and sensed death, and with that approach of death, for the first time, Dragon dared to hope. He found hope in the despair of death. Nevertheless, nothing was certain yet, because doubts still plague him. So did that mean Arthur had the means to corner Dragon? Arthur Boyle, a person who lived in delusion and sees waking dreams, imagining impossible things, impossible beings. To see the impossible and dream of the fantastic, that's what people called a fool. But Arthur enjoyed himself and enjoyed life. Even though he had witnessed spontaneous human combustion, even though he had been abandoned by his parents, in his delusions, in his enjoyment, he didn't know what dejection was. Was he truly the definition of a fool, or does he not just live life well, so he endeavored to enjoy such things as death? For Arthur, that endless void where he offered his life was the mythical Avalon where the Night King rested. Although Arthur and Dragon were complete opposites at a glance, they had a point of commonality, because for both of them, hope was in death. In the next scene, Arthur said he would finish Dragon, so Dragon asked him if his year's worth of despair would end on his sword. Then, we learned that the extreme state that surpassed the press of death was steeled for death, and in Arthur's mind, he thought he only had one strike from there, and that would be it. But that attack was just the beginning. Dragon said that Arthur couldn't defeat him from where he was, so Arthur replied that Dragon should be grateful that he stood where he was, because with that strike, Dragon would find hope. Arthur charged after that, and shouted that they should enjoy it, while Dragon shouted that it was their death. Arthur powerfully charged for his final attack, while Dragon used a mega laser blast. In the next scene, there was a massive explosion caused by Dragon's incredibly powerful laser blast attack, which hit Arthur directly that left his body in tatters. Nevertheless, even though Arthur was beaten up, he could slice apart his opponent. Arthur accompanied his attack with the Violet Flash, prompting Dragon to ask if that was it. The attack Arthur executed was the Violet Flash Earth Divider, and because of its enormous scale, the Earth was indeed affected by the attack. There was an extremely bright white light on Earth, which made Captain Obi ask what it was, while Hinawa said it had split the Earth in two. According to Licht, that was the light of Arthur's hope, and after that attack, Joker asked how it would play out. Tamaki said that Arthur had defeated Dragon, while Maki asked how the Night King was doing. Ogun said that after such an attack, there's no way that he, aka Shinra, will be able to sit still. And in the next scene, Arthur was shown tumbling through space, while Dragon was gradually disappearing. He praised Arthur for what he did, and said that finally, he had been vanquished, and in the last moment of that existence, Arthur had shown him hope. In his final words, he thanked him, and said he was happy that Arthur was there, who was pleased by what he said, even though he was now alone in space. Then, we turned to Faerie, who also saw that the world was split, and he was surprised with a mix of nervousness because Dragon had been defeated. He also mentioned that the hope seen by Dragon was cleansing the despair. While that was happening, Licht said that Arthur's light is putting out the flames and managed to hold back the cataclysm. Because of this, Vulcan and you also learned that Arthur had defeated Dragon, while Obi was praising him. Maki asked if Arthur would return, and Tamaki replied of course he would, and she was sure that Arthur was safe and sound. Going back to the Night King, Arthur was asking Shinra how long he would play as the devil, because he had become the Night King. However, it seemed that he had allowed too many hits from Dragon, and he felt that it would take a long time to heal. He was gradually losing consciousness at that time, and he added that the sun was brighter compared to when he was on Earth. After saying this, it seemed he completely lost his strength, so he dropped Excalibur and said he would leave the rest to the hero. In the next scene, we moved to where the pillars were, and Sister Sumire was surprised by what was happening, because the cataclysm was proceeding smoothly. Then, Shinra was shown to us, and he suddenly woke up, which surprised the nun even more. Shinra immediately tried to escape from his entrapment, and before long, he succeeded, with an extremely intense expression on his face. There was a small explosion near the eye because of this, and Shinra was shocked by what was happening to the world. In the next scene, Faerie was observing Tokyo, and he saw that the cataclysm had died down, which was also noticed by the people, prompting one to ask if that meant they could relax now. On the other hand, Faerie still found it inconceivable for the dragon to lose to a member of Company 8, an incarnation of calamity, defeated by a whelp, and he couldn't believe that Arthur had shown hope to the great dragon of despair. He couldn't accept that it was the end of despair, and he said he wouldn't let it end there, so he raised his hand. Then, we moved to another place, where peace had also returned, and Obi said it seemed that the cataclysm had stopped for now. But before he could finish, Licht asked if it was likely that Arthur had defeated Dragon. Tamaki replied that Dragon was a powerful member of the establishment, and the waning of his despair was the waning of the cataclysm. But Licht said he didn't believe it ended there. While they were discussing this, Faerie did something, and he said for them all to remember. That was despair. He did something in the sky, where he brought the moon closer, making the weird smiling moon clearly visible, and he said let the despair begin anew. Because of this, the entire earth shook, prompting Company 8 to ask if it was an earthquake, and Joker replied that it wasn't, and he pointed to the large moon, which seemed to be staring at their souls. Captain Obi was surprised by this, and that turned out to be what was causing the tremors, while people were frightened, wondering why it was so close. Faerie said he would tear the hope of people from its roots, and in that moonfall, they would remember the taste of despair. It was like a powerful tornado that swept through that place, so Obi told his companions to take cover. Licht asked where, so Obi asked Hinawa and Maki if there was anything they could do. Hinawa replied that they would do what they could, and he immediately ordered Maki to try to alter the trajectory of the moon. She tried to do it, but while calling it a stupid moon, she made eye contact with it, and suddenly collapsed, prompting Hinawa to immediately check on her. She asked the moon if it thought it could squash her, and she told herself that she needed to push back, but at that moment, her nose suddenly bled. She was even more unable to stand because of this, because she was being crushed by its overwhelming mass. In another place, Huoyin was asking Kareem if his thermoacoustic refrigeration could do anything, and he replied that he'll figure something out, but wondered what way. While that was happening, Honda was asking Juggernaut if he could shoot down the moon, and Juggernaut replied that it was out of range, but when it was in range, he could do it, which immediately made Honda think. Then, he told his subordinates in Company 2 that it was an honor to serve with them, but they were relieved from their duty, and all that was left was to pray for the people they cared for. The members of Company 2 thanked Captain Honda, but they seemed surprised by something. Suddenly, there was something flying quickly toward the moon, while Faerie was saying that no matter what people did, they couldn't stop the moon from falling, and they would be crushed like ants. However, in the next scene, his jaw dropped in shock, because there was something quickly charging at the moon, and it collided with it with tremendous force. We learned that it was none other than the hero, Shinra, and he gave the moon a mega kick, and he kicked it several times, causing it to gradually return to space. He was shouting because of his extreme effort, and Faerie was shocked that he was the one doing it. Then, Sho appeared behind him, and he had bad news for him, because his brother, the hero, had returned. When Sho appeared before Faerie, he wondered how Sho had escaped from the pillar. He seemed nervous when he realized that Shinra might have actually stopped the moon. Sho spoke to him saying he had used his power to make the moon fall in order to spur people's despair. However, his brother had stopped it. Too bad for him. Faerie thought about this and replied, did he think the moon, which came so close, could be stopped? It was too late, and it couldn't be pushed back anymore. However, Sho read his nervousness and asked why. He wondered if he was that afraid of his brother. Faerie couldn't believe this. Sho insisted that his brother was the savior, and his very existence was enough to make him tremble. He then asked if he was wrong, and Faerie couldn't answer. And while the two were talking, the moon could be seen stopping its approach to Earth. Sho smiled while Faerie sweated nervously and couldn't accept it. The fire soldiers below were shocked that it had stopped. Joker was impressed that the moon had halted, and there was no doubt that it was Shinra. However, Licht was still nervous because it was still too close to Earth. While floating in the air, Shinra wasn't sure if he had really managed to stop the moon. It didn't seem to be falling anymore anyway. Maybe that was good enough. Meanwhile, Faerie still couldn't accept this and called it foolishness. He said that was impossible. Sho said this might be the reason why the White Clads were so afraid of Shinra. As long as the savior lived, there would be hope. Again, he said his brother would save the world, even if it meant changing the physical laws. He then declared that Faerie would die there. Faerie asked if he planned to stop time. Sho prepared to attack using his sword, targeting his head. However, Faerie blocked it and pushed him back, which Sho didn't expect. Faerie smiled, while Sho couldn't believe it. He asked how Faerie had moved. Faerie explained that because Adolla was close, the brothers weren't the only ones with the ability to manipulate time. Sho was confused because his power was gravity manipulation. So he asked what Faerie had done. He said mass distorted both space and time. It changed the very flow of time. When he altered the mass between them, he interrupted the flow of time that Sho had altered. He had a big smile when he said he wasn't the only one now who could stop time. He then asked what now. Sho couldn't stop time unilaterally. So what would Sho do now? Sho just said sheesh, because he didn't understand, which surprised Faerie. Sho raised his sword and said that all Faerie had done was put himself on the same stage as him. However, he wouldn't be able to keep up with his blade. Faerie shouted not to think too highly of himself. He should have been Sho's guardian, and Sho was no match for him. But Sho effortlessly and quickly stabbed him in the body with his sword. Faerie couldn't even struggle as Sho said goodbye to him. When Sho moved away and pulled out his sword, blood flowed from Faerie's chest and mouth. But even though he was bleeding, Faerie was still smiling. Again, he said Sho was clearly thinking too highly of himself. Did he think that by killing him, everything would end and he would be the victor? He called Sho a filthy runt. But Sho just asked if that was all he had to say as the leader of the Cataclysm force. He had expected a better parting remark. However, Faerie confirmed that he is indeed a part of the Cataclysm force. To which Sho remarked that he did such a great job. Suddenly, the other members of his group appeared on a rooftop of a building. Faerie called them because it was time for the martyrs. They all pointed their knives to their necks and declared that they, the Cataclysm force, would give their lives to summon the doppelgangers. The doppelgangers of the most powerful members of the establishment would usher in despair. Sho was troubled by what he said, especially when they took their own lives. Blood flowed there, and Sho couldn't believe their decision, so he called them freaks. However, he was troubled by the mention of the arrival of doppelgangers. Slowly, a black shadow could be seen, and Sho wondered what this meant for the strong members of the establishment. Moving to Asakusa, Benimaru sits deep in thought. He walks around, clearly troubled, thinking about his doppelganger. While in the hallway, Kurono approaches and calls out to him. Benimaru seems to already know what he's going to say. Kurono mentions the doppelganger, but Benimaru corrects him, saying it's doppelganger. Meanwhile, the body of the martyrs who gave their lives for the doppelgangers lay there as Sho stares intensely. He's disturbed by Faerie's statement that powerful establishment members would have doppelgangers. The declaration that they would give their lives for this purpose returns to his memory. Soon after, he senses their arrival. Suddenly, something falls out of nowhere, landing in the city. As a result, powerful explosions occur. Sho looks up at the sky as many more follow. The city becomes engulfed in flames. The citizens are alarmed, wondering what's happening. They thought the cataclysm was dying down. They look up to notice Asakusa's destroyer. As predicted, Benimaru's doppelganger has arrived, and the original Benimaru prepares for the confrontation. Shifting to Shinra, his brother calls him. Shinra guesses what he's about to say. The battle isn't over yet. Sho reports that the Cataclysm force sacrificed themselves to summon new doppelgangers. Shinra urges him that they should stop them together. Sho responds that he needs to do what only he can do. When asked what that is, while staring at the giant eyeball above, he answers that he must finish things with the holy maiden Haumea and the evangelist. Only the Savior can do this. Shinra smiles and calls him his guardian angel. Sho says that everyone, including their mother, is waiting in Adolla. That's right, Shinra answers. The place that Arthur will return to cannot disappear. Therefore, he and Sho must protect that world. This will be the final battle of their story. Another figure falls from above, and it's the young Nataku. Though nervous, he manages to use his flame to land safely. After touching down, he wonders what freed him from Adolla. He stares upward and notices the giant eyeball. He's troubled because that world is still connected to the thought world of Adolla. Because of this, he says there's something he needs to find first. Nataka notices the successive explosions going off for a while and comments that the place is still chaotic. He wonders if Shinra and the other pillars were also freed. Then he realized that he needs to find Kurono. To his surprise, he spots him right in front of him. He calls out to him and quickly runs toward him. This is perfect, Nataka says, asking if he was looking for him. However, he remains silent with his back turned. Suddenly, he strikes Nataku in the face, something the young kid didn't expect. Nataku even falls to the ground from the force of the blow. Kurono responds that he's been waiting for him, calling him Taken. Nataka looks at him confused and asks who he is. Kurono is shocked by the question, insisting he's Kurono. He asks if Nataku has forgotten about his uncle's death. However, Nataku isn't convinced because, according to him, Kurono doesn't sneer like that. Kurono denies this, but Nataku continues, saying the real Kurono is a degenerate. It's impossible for him to smile while bullying others. For Kurono, bullying the weak is totally natural. There's nothing funny about it. Smiling like that while bullying is proof that one is doing something wrong. Nataku declares this person is just a lame faker pretending to be a degenerate. He then uses his ability and insists this isn't Kurono. The imposter smiles and says Nataku is a very clever boy. However, he adds that there are still many things Nataku doesn't understand. The world doesn't care whether you're real or fake. There's nothing strange about people's perception of a thing replacing the original. People accept imitations all the time. Nataku called the imposter a sham of the real Kurono. But the fake asked Nataku if he can really declare him as just a sham. After all, he represents people's perception of Kurono, his given form. He is the Kurono everyone knows. It doesn't matter if he replaces the original. The only ones who care are those close to him. He just needs to defeat the original. He adds that they live in a world where victory pardons everything. What matters is victory. And if he wins, he'll become the original. Imitations will seep into the world before people realize it. Nataku is troubled by what he hears. Suddenly, Rekka appears beside him and cheers him up. If the situation is that frightening, Rekka says Nataku should just agree. He can overcome it. The fake Kurono asks if Nataku is afraid of the original being destroyed. The only people who care about the original's disappearance are those who know him. And in this world, they don't matter much. He asks if Nataku is afraid while thinking about the possibility of the real Kurono disappearing. Young Nataku sweats nervously as the imposter asks if he's filling with despair. The fake uncle bids farewell, saying he's leaving to kill the real one. Nataku tries to stop him, but suddenly halts when someone grabs his head. He's thrown to the ground, which confuses him. Upon looking, he sees it's the real Kurono confronting his imitation. Nataku is overjoyed at his arrival. Kurono can't believe that's his doppelganger. But the imposter threatens to destroy him and plunge the sixth pillar into despair. Director Aguro is also present and tells Nataku to step back, confident that Kurono can handle this. The two face each other. The doppelganger attacks first, declaring he'll torture Kurono to death. Kurono prepares as the imposter swings his sword at him. Using his ability, Kurono solidifies smoke to create a defensive weapon. He then emits black smoke that envelopes his doppelganger. While holding his weapon, the enemy stares at him and says that Kurono's smoke is also his. The smoke passes through him while Kurono stands holding his sword in both hands. When the smoke clears, the doppelganger emerges, having managed to wound Kurono's body. Kurono has a cut on his face, and so he's pleased by the blood and desires more. The doppelganger laughs at what he's accomplished, then licks the blade of his weapon. That made Kurono flinch. The imposter asks what's wrong. He asks if Kurono is ready to be replaced. He warned that if he's not careful enough, the fake will surely become him. Kurono remains silent before asking if that's really the impression he gives. The doppelganger didn't expect to hear this from him. Kurono remarks that the imposter is like a B-movie psycho. Meanwhile, the doppelganger responds that this is how people see them. He tells Kurono to think of him as a surface-level recreation of Yuichiro Kurono, and even if he replaces him, nobody would care. Nataku interrupts, asking about the original and the people who know him. There are people who care about him. The doppelganger manifests another weapon using smoke and declares that humanity consists of sticky-fingered thieves. He asks if Nataku thinks anyone else would be concerned if he steals Kurono's identity. He uses a scythe which he swings, hitting and destroying a wall. He says history is written by the victor. What he does doesn't matter anymore. That's just how the world has always been. Kurono evades the attack, while Nataku urges him to finish off the enemy. The doppelganger smiles and asks Kurono if he thinks non-establishment nobodies would care. He attacks again, which Kurono blocks with his blade. The doppelganger adds that those who don't think, who have no ethics, these nobodies won't make such judgments. He nearly hits Kurono with his weapon. He uses his ignition ability again to release smoke, which he directs at the real Kurono, telling him to die. Kurono is thrown back by the attack. However, Kurono responds that they're different. First, no matter how much power he has, he would never use it to be inhumane. Second, he's an upstanding office worker, not a psycho. The doppelganger jumps and questions what he's saying, pointing out that Kurono bullies children. Kurono explains that it's part of his job. He has permission from the company to bully children. While dodging the attacks, he says he has permission to bully the weak. When Kurono counterattacks, the doppelganger blocks it, saying he's permitted to replace him. Kurono insists this won't happen. People might be ignorant and content, or they might not care and just follow along. The doppelganger's claims about humanity being preconditioned to be thieves might be correct. Who knows? However, the permission he needs doesn't come from those nobodies, but from the one he's replacing, which is Kurono himself. Kurono reiterated that it's just not meant to be. While holding his scythe, he says he needs to leave this world. The doppelganger laughed hysterically and declared that he wanted to see Kurono's insides as he had many plans for him. Kurono couldn't believe the insane laughter, not to mention the extreme language being used. He questioned what was wrong with him, saying he resembled the captain of the 4th Division. He still couldn't accept that this was people's impression of him. Looking behind at director Aguro, who explained that's just how it goes. When you don't really know someone well, you tend to make them into an abstract character in an attempt to categorize and understand them. Kurono asked if this meant people categorized him as a cardboard cutout slasher. He admitted being troubled by how people perceived him now, as it affected his salary. The doppelganger licked his blade again, prompting Kurono to comment that he didn't need to lick it every single time. The doppelganger charged forward, claiming they were the same, with their only difference being their viewpoint. Kurono manifested a scythe which he used to block the attack. The doppelganger declared that he was nothing but scum who bullied the weak, insisting that he represented the true perception of what Kurono really was. Suddenly, he emitted black smoke that he wielded as a weapon to attack Kurono, which Kurono managed to block. The smoke surrounded him, and the doppelganger said it was a blade that would tear him limb from limb. Indeed, the smoke transformed into enormous blades that Kurono desperately tried to avoid. He escaped and retreated. Nataka became concerned when he saw that Kurono was injured. The doppelganger stated that he didn't care about his position in the company. Therefore, he had no reason to hold back, and that's what made him stronger. Is that right? Asked Kurono. If he was that strong, he should consider throwing away his position at the company and just leave. But he didn't think the doppelganger was that strong. The doppelganger told him to stop acting tough, calling him real me. Kurono clarified that he wasn't acting tough, but they did have one thing in common. They both only thought about themselves. Yet fundamentally, they were completely different. The doppelganger attacked again, using claw-like smoke, and asked how they were different. Kurono used the smoke to his advantage and countered his attack. Kurono stated that while he might be selfish, it didn't mean he fought alone. The doppelganger, preparing to attack, asked if that made Kurono stronger than him. Nataka became concerned when he noticed he was trapped in the giant claws. But according to Kurono, his strength didn't come from being an unhinged psycho. He explained that he was a professional company man, which confused the doppelganger. Kurono suddenly requested orders from Director Aguro, who responded with "Go for it." This resulted in a massive explosion when Kurono acknowledged with "Understood." He solidified the smoke and used it as a sharp weapon to strike the doppelganger. However, the doppelganger avoided it while the ground was destroyed. Kurono attacked again, this time hitting the doppelganger, who was thrown against a wall. Kurono manifested snake-like creatures, but the doppelganger just smiled. There were numerous serpents behind Kurono, and he explained that he could fight because he could pass responsibility to his boss. The doppelganger laughed, saying Kurono couldn't do anything without the say-so of his boss. Therefore, he offered to free him from that chain way of living. Kurono responded that the doppelganger was trying hard to copy and replace him, but asked if he really wanted to be him. The doppelganger replied as if, saying he only wanted the perks of being Kurono. In an instant, the serpents simultaneously attacked and finished him off. Kurono declared he would never allow someone to replace him just because they wanted his perks or achievements. The only reason he wanted to be him was because he would gain something from it. If there had been a little love behind it, then it would have been okay. Nataku ran toward him, causing Kurono to look back. When their eyes met, Nataka breathed a sigh of relief and thanked him for being the real Kurono. Kurono gave him a knock on the head. According to Kurono, He was the only one who could bully Nataku from now on. They were surprised when they looked up at the giant eyeball above, and Kurono mentioned that was if their world was still there. The explosions and flames continued to spread throughout the city. Sho became concerned when he noticed this. Even though the threat of Faerie was gone, there were still doppelgangers around. The scene then shifted to Tamaki. When Maki asked if she was ready because they were leaving, she seemed spaced out but answered yes. Captain Obi informed them that there was widespread damage in the metro area, so they would provide relief, and Company 8 responded with Roger. Suddenly, someone said that wouldn't be necessary. Tamaki was shocked when she saw him saying that they were standing right at Ground Zero. Arrow recognized him. He introduced himself as the assassin from the abyss. He claimed to be the Bloody Bullet, Assault. Nani? Tamaki was surprised to see that he was still alive. But Arrow questioned if this was really him, which made Tamaki curious too. He said thanks to her, his reputation was ruined. He was there to prove his true strength. Arrow asked if he was a doppelganger. He responded that he was the real Assault. He challenged them to witness the truth with their own eyes. Tamaki wondered how they would do that when she suddenly stepped on a small duck toy, causing her to slip. As a result, her clothes came off due to her lucky lecher lure. Tamaki observed his reaction. However, he didn't even blink. Damn! With her uniform still raised, she was shocked that he had no reaction, to which Arrow said that was impossible. Because of this, Tamaki realized he was fake, merely a doppelganger. He clarified that while they were technically right, they weren't. He would never falter at the sight of a Jezebel. If anyone should be the real Assault, it was him. He prepared to attack using his ability and set off. He created missiles to kill Tamaki. However, Hinawa helped her, telling her to take cover. He aimed his gun at the doppelganger and released a powerful bullet that caused an explosion in the air. Captain Obi questioned if that was the man who was obsessively pursuing Tamaki. Hinawa thought the doppelganger wasn't any different, but he was surprised when the doppelganger suddenly appeared behind him and said they weren't the same, and that Hinawa will die now. From behind, he hit Hinawa with his missile, causing him to be thrown back. Maki became extremely angry at this and attacked him next. However, using just his index finger, he stopped her effortlessly. Arrow attacked next, but he blocked her arrow with just his finger as if it were nothing. Vulcan was shocked by what he saw. He had thought this guy was just a chump who was defeated when Tamaki used her lucky lecher lure. Lick didn't know if it was true, but presumably, the White Clads held him in high regard. Arrow was shocked that her attack had no effect on him. Assault just winked and asked if that was all Company 8 had to offer. Arrow said that if Assault had unleashed his full abilities when they fought in the Nether, Company 8 would have surely been wiped out. If Tamaki's sex appeal didn't work on him, then they couldn't stop him anymore, even with their numbers. Even Tamaki couldn't believe that the real Assault was this powerful. Suddenly, someone shouted for everyone to fall back, which startled everyone. Something like a missile came from the sky and targeted Assault. It caused an extremely powerful explosion. Maki controlled the flames to prevent them from being affected. Everyone was shocked by the explosion, even Captain Obi. It turned out to be someone introducing himself as Nodo from Company 2, reporting in. He said he had arrived as their backup. Tamaki was shocked to see him and asked what Juggernaut was doing there. He smiled and replied that it was Captain Honda's orders. They were told to take care of those who were important to them, so he was there for Kotatsu. Tamaki was shocked by his words and blushed. In the midst of the smoke, Assault spoke, asking if they thought the arrival of one more person would give him trouble. He insisted that he wouldn't be subdued by sex. Impressively, despite the powerful impact of the missile on his surroundings, the Assault doppelganger didn't receive even a scratch. He challenged them to come closer, saying he would take them all down simultaneously. Because of this, Captain Obi said that he and Maki would create an opening. Hinawa would provide fire support. Tamaki, Juggernaut, and Arrow would follow up on Hinawa's attacks. Arrow thought that while Assault might be strong, if all of them attacked him together, maybe they'd have a chance. They moved into action. The Assault doppelganger released numerous missiles, which surprised them. Captain Obi quickly took cover and noticed that Maki was the first to move and attack. She didn't hesitate to approach and confront the doppelganger. However, he caught her and threw her to the ground with tremendous force. Hinawa became concerned for her, so he aimed his gun at the doppelganger. He targeted him, but Assault countered, causing Hinawa's weapon to shatter. He targeted Hinawa's body, causing him to be thrown back. Captain Obi was next to face him, using all his brute strength. However, Assault blocked him with just one finger. Captain Obi was shocked by this. He said that even though he approached with his full strength, he couldn't be easily defeated by might. Assault prepared to punch him powerfully in the body. The impact was visible on Obi's face, causing him to fall to his knees. Assault effortlessly took down Captain Obi, Tamaki, and Hinawa, which the remaining fighters couldn't believe. Vulcan couldn't accept that all of them were defeated so easily. Licht wondered if this was truly Assault's real power. It was Arrow's turn to attack, but Assault suddenly approached her and called her a filthy traitor. He pointed 2 fingers at her neck and easily took her down. Because of this, he said the only ones left were Juggernaut and Tamaki, as well as the non-powered individuals. Vulcan suddenly remembered to look for Joker, to which Licht replied that he was looking into another doppelganger. Assault noticed Juggernaut, who wasn't part of the 8th Company. Because of this, he said he would let him leave. Juggernaut replied that he couldn't do that, which surprised Assault. He added that a fire soldier doesn't abandon those they love and escape. He would never do that. Assault asked if he hadn't seen what happened. He had no chance against him. However, Juggernaut replied that he already knew that. Juggernaut used his ability and said that the world was ending and he might die at any moment. Therefore, he didn't want to have any regrets. He would protect the one he loved. Again, Tamaki blushed at his words. With his back turned, he asked her if they saved the world, would it be okay for him to date her? Tamaki couldn't answer him. Rage was evident in Assault's eyes as he suddenly punched Juggernaut in the stomach. He said he should die already. The impact was so powerful that it sent him flying through the air. Assault declared that anyone who talks about love while fighting is soft. They had no right to be on the battlefield. Because of this, only Tamaki Kotatsu remained. He approached her, and Tamaki had no choice but to just raise her uniform. Assault said she was wasting her time, because that had no effect on him anymore. Those around them were shocked, and they called her a whorish fire soldier, which troubled Tamaki. With her clothes still raised, everyone around was looking at them. The doppelganger said she was objectifying herself. Sex appeal had no value in that world. Tamaki no longer knew what else she could do. And because her chest was exposed, people began questioning what was going on with her. They said she had no shame, with someone commenting that looking at her, she wasn't even that cute. The public has spoken, said Assault. The world doesn't need lechers like her. Tamaki couldn't even respond, with her clothes raised. To the side, Licht wondered what her lucky lecher meant. Meanwhile, Vulcan couldn't believe that's what he was thinking about. He told him to forget that and find a way for them to win. Licht remained quiet, deep in thought. He said that it was undeniable that Tamaki was a member of the establishment, and that meant she existed to fill a role in this world. He had assumed until now that Tamaki was just a klutz, but apparently that wasn't the case. Back to Assault's doppelganger, he stated that Tamaki's lure wouldn't work on him, so she had no chance of winning anymore. Tamaki used her ignition ability and asked him to shut up. However, Assault effortlessly threw off her flame, which she hadn't expected. Assault said she was hopeless. He suddenly kicked her with tremendous force in the stomach, and although clearly hurt, Tamaki remained standing. Assault gave her credit for being able to take that hit. However, he claimed her lewdness was worthless, so he attacked her again. When she fell down, her clothing rode up, prompting Assault to ask if she was now trying to attack using her butt.
Daddy, chill.
He said it wouldn't work. Again, the people around commented. They said Tamaki was shameless and a disgrace to women. They questioned if that was all she was good for. Tamaki was troubled by what she heard, and when Assault tried to hit her again, she quickly dodged and backed away, causing Assault to comment that she was somewhat fast. Nevertheless, he claimed he had her now. He released a missile that struck Tamaki's body, causing the upper part of her clothing to be torn and damaged. Due to the impact of that attack, she just lay on the ground. Assault said he would end her exhibitionism. The people around weren't pleased and called Tamaki a vulgar woman. They said she should have some decency. The mother and child whom Captain Obi had met earlier were also there. The woman told Tatsudo not to look there, yet his eyes widened. Tamaki just coughed, struggling to stand up after what happened. Assault told her to listen carefully and watch him. He said that would be the end of her lecher. Still, many more comments could be heard from others. Someone asked if all she knew was to flaunt her body. Tamaki was also called Good for Nothing, who had the audacity to serve as a fire soldier. They couldn't believe that a fire soldier like her sprawl out like that. They wondered if she thinks she could find a man that way. They told her to straighten herself up and fight properly. Again, others said she was a disgrace to women. Vulcan was puzzled by what he heard from the people since she was fighting for them. Licht remained quiet before saying that the background characters were now being carried away. And now that it started, it won't stop. Prepare yourself, Tamaki Kotatsu, said the doppelganger. He said he would kill her and end her lecherous existence. He opened his hands in preparation for his finishing blow when suddenly someone spoke up and said that the world needed sex appeal. The doppelganger was surprised because he recognized that voice. It was his own. With his hands still raised, he hadn't expected the arrival of who he called a sex-crazed loser. The other responded that he wasn't wrong there. He had learned about sexiness and had given into it. Now face to face, the doppelganger asked why he was there, and the one he was speaking to was Assault. When Tamaki, who was on the ground, asked if this was the real Assault, the doppelganger replied that he would never be the real Assault because he had been corrupted by sex, unable to fight it, and had been completely corrupted by it. He called him a pathetic, sex-crazed loser and told him to leave. However, Assault's attention shifted to Tamaki, who was slowly standing up. Because her clothes were torn, her side boob was now visible. This made the real Assault flustered, which prompted the doppelganger to suddenly punch him while saying that his worldly desires were the reason why that was sexy. The impact was so strong that the real Assault was sent flying far away. The doppelganger added that he was full of openings, so he had no chance. He asked if he couldn't see that all he accomplished by coming there was to embarrass himself. Tatsudo's mother then spoke up and said that women should just find an alley to die in because there were children watching. Licht recognized her as one of the head researchers from Hijima. When he asked if she was Yoshida, she recognized him in return. She asked if that woman was a soldier from his company and what was going on with her. The people's mockery of Tamaki still wouldn't stop. While some felt bad for her, saying it was the man's fault, others called her gross and wondered how she was raised to become so crude. One man said he couldn't stand women like her. The doppelganger pitted Tamaki's sex appeal and said he would let her be censored. But Vulcan defended her because she was fighting hard. It was just happening because of her lucky lecher thing. Yoshida then asked him if he was an idiot. There was no such thing as a lucky lecher lure. He had just been deceived by that woman. Licht was still thinking on the side and seemed to have realized something from the events. Again, someone said Tamaki was a disgrace to women. They couldn't even air what was happening on the news, not even on government broadcast. Tamaki became annoyed and said she was completely fed up with their whining. If they didn't want skin, then she would show them something else. After she said that, she gradually removed her clothes, from her fire coat to her leggings. And when those two were removed, all that remained on her was her bra and panties. Her leggings even created a small crater when they fell, and she said that what she would show was the true weight of sex appeal. This angered Yoshida more, and it was clearly visible in her extremely fierce eyes. She called Tamaki a vulgar whore, while asking what she thought she was doing in front of children, and if she didn't feel any shame as a woman. Tamaki had enough of Yoshida, so she told her to be quiet, because she was trying to defeat the fake Assault, and she didn't need her commentary on everything she was doing. Yoshida complained to Licht because of this, and asked him if he could believe Tamaki. Licht replied that Yoshida shouldn't look at him, which angered her more as she asked why he was remaining silent, because all Tamaki ever did was strip, and she thought everything would work through nudity because she was cute and young. Licht asked her if she was saying that Tamaki shouldn't do that because her body was cute, so he asked him if she wouldn't care if an old, ugly person did it. She replied that was exactly it, because everyone should be given an opportunity, and it was unfair that only people with curvy bodies were praised for their appearance. Her child started thinking because of this, and told her that she wasn't making sense. If Tamaki needed to be considerate of others because she was cuter than them, then was his mother claiming that all people who stand out in anything need to be considerate too? It was visible on Yoshida's face that she knew her son was right, and he even told her that she was an elite researcher at Hijima, so wasn't she standing out in that aspect? However, If there were people who were stupid and couldn't be researchers even if they wanted to, was his mother saying that she would let that person become a researcher in her stead? The child added that garbage players should be allowed to play in place of regulars in sports, and stupid people should be allowed to enter universities. And in music, there were many singers who lived off their looks. But before he could finish, Yoshida said she became smart because she made an effort, so she was different from people who were just blessed with looks at birth, so it wasn't the same. Nevertheless, the child argued that being intelligent was still a talent, because there were many people in the world who couldn't understand how to study. So his mother was wrong, because she had been smart from birth, and that was also the reason why he had top grades in his school. He said the trained body of a female fire soldier was beautiful, and such a beautiful body was proof of daily training and hard work. Because of extreme irritation, his mother was about to slap him, but he blocked it, and he said that even if she threatens other people with violence to impose her ideals on them, her sexual frustrations wouldn't be solved if she didn't change herself. Yoshida got angry and shouted at her son Tatsudo. And according to Tatsudo, that was indeed him, because that was the name Obi called him. So he had become a character. But what was his mother's name? Because all he knew about her was that she was his mother. Yoshida was speechless because of this, and Tatsudo added that perhaps she was just a background character who said whatever, without thinking about what they provide in the exposition. Yoshida asked what Tatsudo was saying, and if that was what a child said to his mother. Tatsudo replied that his mother was at least a background character, but he thought that someone as old as his mother shouldn't be shouting hysterically. Because of this, Yoshida complained to Licht, saying her son had become strange, and she blamed Tamaki. But according to Licht, Tatsudo was right, because even though they were colleagues, all he saw Yoshida as was Tatsudo's mother. Then, Yoshida suddenly disappeared, which surprised Licht, while Tatsudo said her role was over, and his mother just went with it. Licht was about to say something, but before he could begin, Tatsudo said he was an established character who had gained a name among those in the background and could think for himself. Back to the battle, Tamaki and the fake assault faced each other, and Tatsudo added that the mob was only good for carrying pitchforks and torches, so Tamaki should extinguish it. Then, the real assault arrived behind Tamaki, who told her that she had revealed her sexier side. She replied that she didn't want to, but after being heckled like that, she felt the need to push back. Assault said that Tamaki should be proud, because she was the reason why his lewdness had been awakened. Tamaki thought about this, while the fake charged, saying that lewdness was unnecessary, and it shouldn't be brought out in the open. Assault asked if he was saying that lewdness should only be hidden in the shadows, and at that moment, the two clashed. As they continued to attack and counter each other, Assault asked if his fake was saying that lewdness should be erased from the world. And what about the children who didn't know what lewd was and hadn't seen lewd peeking out from wherever? Would his fake teach them to become big perverts like him? While watching the two Assaults fight, Licht mentioned that Tamaki was an establishment who held one of the keys to the world's survival. But before he could finish, the scene shifted to Tamaki, who gave the fake Assault a powerful strike, sending him flying backward, and she glared at him. Then, Assault punched the fake, saying that lewd was essential, but the fake countered, saying it was worthless. Nevertheless, Assault argued that lewd was the future and it was hope. According to Licht, he was always bothered by the supernatural phenomenon of Tamaki's lucky lecturing. Then, he said Shinra was the hero, Sho was the angel, Captain Obi was the guiding light, and they all had roles. Tamaki, on the other hand, was the symbol of life, the hope that led to the future. In the next scene, we return to the battle of the two Assaults, and the fake was still arguing that lewd was worthless, while for the real one, it was essential. The fake said that Assault was just a man who lost to sex, and was just making excuses for it. Assault replied that it was true he once thought he had lost to sex, but he noticed that along with it, he gained enormous vigor, and it was because of Tamaki. He said before, all he could do was kill people, but lewdness gave him hope for the future. Tamaki asked him if it was that much, but Assault didn't answer her anymore, because he attacked the fake while saying he would defeat him and protect all lechers in the world. He hit his fake with a powerful bullet attack, but the fake avoided it and told him that he wouldn't let him run rampant. He said he couldn't be defeated by anything except sex, and because of this, Tamaki seemed to be affected by what was said. So were the other spectators, including Tatsudo. According to Licht, the Great Cataclysm used people's despair to destroy the world. But lewdness was something that connected living creatures to the future, so that meant it was a one-of-a-kind hope that could stop the cataclysm. In the next scene, Assault hit his fake with a crimson stiffy bullet, a gigantic bullet attack that caused a massive impact on the ground. But still, the fake stood his ground and blocked the shockwaves. And Assault said that a world without lewdness had no future, and was he wrong? Then, people mentioned the words life, pulse, vigor, cheerfulness, and they included the word lewd. At that time, Maki was just getting up from the powerful attack of the fake Assault, and she was asking what the situation was. She was surprised by what she saw, because people had stripped, and they imitated Tamaki, who was only in her underwear.
What the fuck is going on here?
The fake was also surprised by this, while Maki was asking what was happening. Captain Obi told her that it wasn't the time to lie around, and she saw that the captain also had no upper clothing, which confused her even more. It was the same with Lieutenant Hinawa, who told Tamaki that what she was doing was good. So it seemed that Maki realized what she needed to do, and she removed her clothes while cheering for Tamaki. Tamaki heard the cheers of her allies, which increased her confidence in herself, while the fake Assault was extremely angry. The real one told him that lewd was hope, it was beautiful and cool, so why was the fake denying it? Then, he used a stiffy bullet on him that hit directly, causing him to cough up blood, and he told him that Tamaki's lucky lecture was inevitable, and it wasn't a coincidence. At that moment, it was Tamaki's turn to attack, and as Assault said, Tamaki's lucky lecture was indeed inevitable, as her steaming buns planted themselves on the fake's face, who could do nothing about what happened. Tamaki hit him with a powerful push, causing him to fall to the ground with such force that it was felt throughout the area. Tamaki landed safely, while the fake Assault was severely beaten, having been defeated by the combo attack of Tamaki and the real Assault. People were throwing their clothes as a celebration, and Tatsudo said that the mob had completely switched from being angry to a happy mood. According to Licht, the catalyst for this was Fire Soldier Tamaki, and she was the person in charge of the world's sex appeal, a person who could give hope to humanity.
So, my eyes are correct!
Then, we turn to Assault, who told Tamaki that lechery was the hope that connected the world to the next generation, and the future didn't exist for people with no lewdness. He added that it was likely they wouldn't see each other again, so Tamaki thanked him for coming, and he replied that Tamaki was his first. Then, Captain Obi praised Tamaki, along with the shirtless boys of Company 8, Hinawa, and Vulcan. Because of this, Tamaki said she sees that nude firefighters were as popular as ever, while Maki said that enjoying exposure didn't mean people were disrespectful, because they just like each other's beautiful bodies. No one who likes the firefighters' nude calendar disrespects firefighters. According to Licht, Tamaki had endured well, saying she just didn't want to lose to weirdos who confounded their hate with justice, because they thought they were the majority. Nevertheless, Licht argued that was the hope that Tamaki had spurred. After that, Tamaki helped Juggernaut stand up, so when he opened his eyes, he thought that a goddess was in front of him, but Tamaki asked him what he was saying and told him to just stand up, which made him realize that it was his crush. Tamaki then said that Juggernaut had come for her sake, which made him wonder what she was talking about. She asked him if that was what he had said, and that's when Juggernaut remembered it. Tamaki said she was pleased because of that, so she was willing to go on a date with Juggernaut, who seemed unable to believe what he heard. So he just said, "Huh?" Because of this, Tamaki told him not to just answer, "Huh," to what she said, because it was annoying, so he immediately apologized, but he was still happy because he would get to date Tamaki. In another place, the chaos continued, and Obi said there was still a large-scale fire in Iria district, and according to Licht, it was probably another doppelganger that had manifested along with Assault. Joker had supposedly gone there to investigate, but if he was fighting a high-level doppelganger, Licht could only hope that he was okay. In the next scene, in a small alley, Joker was fighting someone. It was his own doppelganger, who was beating him up, and he had already been knocked down because of its strength. He tried to attack it while asking why it was so strong, but it just told him that he was too slow, because it dodged him, to his surprise, and hit him with a powerful exploding attack, which made him bleed more. He was thrown hard against a wall, and his own doppelganger called him pathetic. Because of this, he realized that this was how people saw him. So what a nuisance, and did people think he was some kind of a monster? At that moment, his fake attacked again, using a flying card attack, and some of them missed, but most of them hit. Then it asked him if he had peeked inside Adolla using his eye. So why was he fighting back even though he knew that despair was coming? He replied that he was a seeker, and he had a duty to live until the end. He stood up despite losing a lot of blood, and his fake couldn't believe it, because according to it, that wasn't the image it had of itself. The real Joker said that their fight wasn't over yet, and he thought about what he could do, because he couldn't raise his arm. Before long, he saw something in his left eye, while his doppelganger was taunting him that he had no more cards to use. He sat down at that time, and asked if his fake was serious. It asked him if he couldn't see a way to make a comeback using his left eye, and it said that it was right that he was going to die there. Joker replied that there was no way he would win against his fake and its companion, so he was giving up. The companion of the fake Joker was a tall, dark figure with 2 horns, and it was none other than Leonard Burns, the former captain of Fire Force Company 1. Just like the last time Joker saw him, his right eye was burning, and Joker said that he was peeking into Adolla using his eye, but it didn't suit him to have just one eye, because they needed to be together to complete the set. In the end, it was good to see Burns, because being killed by him was the best thing he could wish for in that disgrace. Burns prepared to attack, but he killed the fake Joker, which shocked the real one, who was suddenly hit with realization. Because of that, he asked if it was really the real Burns, but before he could finish, Burns asked him if he thought he was a doppelganger. Then, the fake Joker disappeared, so Joker asked again if he was the real Burns, because he had killed a doppelganger. According to Burns, they hadn't seen each other since Fuchu, and in that fight, he was pulled into Adolla by his doppelganger, but he kept his sense of self while merging with his image in Adolla. Because of this, Joker called him one stubborn old man. He told him that Adolla was made from people's images, and he was about to tell him the identity of the evangelist. But before he could finish, Joker said he already knew because he had peeked into Burns' eye, and he also saw that the powerful doppelgangers were being born. There were supposedly 2 more left that were called by the Great Cataclysm, and Burns agreed that the 2 were strong, which prompted Joker to mention that they needed to stop them. Then, the scene returned to Kurono, and Aguro told him that he would cooperate with the Fire Force and defeat the doppelgangers in Iria District. Kurono argued that they were certainly strong, so Aguro asked him where he would go if their company vanished along with the world, while Nataka cheered him on. He had no answer to that, and he just looked at the smoke coming from Iria District. At that moment, someone arrived behind him, and when he turned around, he saw that Benimaru's doppelganger was there. Kurono immediately knew that it was the doppelganger of Asakusa's destroyer, and like Benimaru, its expression was blank. Kurono said that he had been planning to skip out on work, so why did the fake Benimaru come there? It asked him if he was strong and challenged him to fight. He pleaded for it to give him a break, because he only wanted to fight people who were weaker than him. The doppelganger replied that it couldn't say it cared about Kurono's preferences, so it attacked him, but Kurono also moved, quickly jumping up toward the sky, but the doppelganger immediately followed him. It used Onii-Chan Form 1, the Kagetsu, on him, causing him to be thrown very far, even though he blocked it using his batons. However, in an instant, Benimaru's doppelganger was in front of him again, and this time it used Form 5, Sokujitsu, so he turned one of his batons into a blade and used it to block the Sokujitsu. Then, he used the Hidden Eclipse, where he surrounded his body with smoke as a smoke screen, but the doppelganger said that was pointless. It easily cleared out the smoke to see Kurono, and said that it could control all ignition abilities within a diameter of 23 shaku and 2 sun, where 1 shaku is approximately 30.3 cm, and 1 sun is approximately 3.03 cm. According to Kurono, that was probably a compliance violation, and at that time, the doppelganger charged at him again, and to his surprise, it could also cancel his soot weapons. The doppelganger replied everything around him, and simultaneously gave Kurono a powerful attack to the stomach. It was a chop attack, accompanied by a push, causing Kurono to crash to the ground. Nevertheless, he managed to catch himself using his smoke powers, and while coughing, he said that he couldn't use his ignition abilities, but the doppelganger could use his power freely, and on top of that, it was the embodiment of what the people of Asakusa believed to be the strongest there is. Continuing with that job would put a stain on his career, so he couldn't do it. The doppelganger asked him if that was the best he could do, while calling him Mr. Hajime craziest. Kurono continued coughing and mentioned that he couldn't believe he was being compared to a monster like his opponent. Because of this, he surrendered because he had no chance of winning if they continued, and he also told the doppelganger that if it was content, it should leave. The fake Benimaru replied that it wasn't like that because he was the king of destruction and he couldn't stop until he destroyed everything. Kurono thought that it looked like he might need to create a smokescreen to escape, but in an instant, the fake was behind him, telling him that it wouldn't let him escape. Then, it gave him a large slash on the back using just its hand, and followed it up with a variety of pokes to his body, then threw him. He was thrown against a wall with such force, and he said that it wasn't fair in the slightest. At that moment, it was about to use AI Chop Form 4, the Sekijutsu, and the real Benimaru could be seen behind it. The fake said that Kurono would die along with that entire city, while Kurono was thinking. Then, he called out to the person behind the fake and asked if that wasn't the real Benimaru, so he told him to stop watching and take his place. Benimaru heard him and said that he thought it was rude to join in on others' fights. But can he? And while asking this, he removed the right sleeve of his kimono. According to Kurono, that was way above his pay grade, because being compared to Benimaru was nothing but a nuisance, and ordering him to do that was power harassment. On the other hand, the two Benimarus greeted each other, and Kurono said that that doppelganger was the image of what the people of Asakusa believed to be the strongest, and the Empire's idea of the king of destruction. Only the real Benimaru, its counterpart, could defeat it, although he wasn't even sure if the real one had a chance. He asked the real Benimaru if he could win, and he replied that if his opponent was anyone other than himself, he would say he could, but he needed to try first before saying anything. Because of this, his fake challenged him and asked if the rage at that time was to fight to decide who was real, and the man in charge of Asakusa should be the strongest. Whoever won would be the real one. In Asakusa, their Fire Force members said that they were in deep now. Shimbita asked that if Waka, who was stronger than anyone, fought a copy of himself who was also stronger than anyone, then who would win? Conro replied asking how would he know that, because it was like the story of the lance and the shield. Shimbita said that Benimaru's doppelganger didn't look too shabby, and according to Conro, that was because it was the true king of destruction, the materialization of the Asakusa and Empire folks' image of the strongest. A member of Company 7 argued that no one could defeat Benimaru, so someone told him he was a dumbass because those kinds of thoughts made Benimaru's copy stronger. Shimbita asked if there wasn't anyone that could defeat Benimaru, so Conro said of course no one could, and he wouldn't be defeated. Because of this, Hinata called them morons, and explained that the more they believed in such things, the stronger the fake would become. Her twin, Hikage, argued that Benimaru wouldn't be defeated anyway, and they couldn't stop that. Conro said that the whole thing was bonkers, and in the next scene, we return to the battle of the two Benimarus. The real one said that he disliked anything bothersome, so whoever won would become the real Benimaru, and his fake agreed with that. He added that he couldn't make half-hearted attacks if he wanted to defeat himself, and he knew that more than anyone. Benimaru was surprised by this, and saw that his fake had activated powerful flames. The skill he activated was the Oniii-Chan, and he told Benimaru that his Oniii-Chan was just a cheap trick. Benimaru could already feel the power of his fake's Oniii-Chan, and he asked if the fake was trying to burn the entire world. The fake replied that he would kill Benimaru along with the whole planet, and those fireworks would be worthy of the name Destroyer. In another place, Company 8 was wondering what was happening in the sky, and someone even pointed it out to Captain Obi. What they were seeing was a long line of fire in the sky. Due to its extreme length, it became a ring of fire that surrounded the Earth, making it look like Saturn, and the fake Benimaru said that was the true Oniii-Chan. Fire Force Company 7 also saw it, and like Company 8, they asked what it was. Shimbita mentioned that that Oniii-Chan was way better than the real Benimaru's, while Conro was speechless. Then, the scene returned to the fake, and he said that what he was doing would be the biggest firework in Shinmon Benimaru's lifetime. So he said goodbye to the real deal. However, Benimaru wasn't ready to lose yet, because he was preparing to attack, and in an instant, he split his doppelganger in two, and he did it using just 2 fingers. The entire Asakusa fire force cheered because of this, as they were delighted that Benimaru crushed the fake in just 1 second. Hinata told Benimaru not to be arrogant just because he was Benimaru, while Hikage said that Benimaru was undefeated in everything except gambling. According to Konro, he was worried for nothing. Then, the doppelganger was shown to us, and he was asking what was happening, because he was supposedly the strongest in the imagination of everyone in the empire. He cited the people of Asakusa as an example, because he was the materialization of the trust they had in Benimaru. The real one replied that he guessed the people of Asakusa thought he was weaker compared to his true strength. Then he asked his subordinates why his fake was so weak, and if they were serious, because they always hyped him up, but in reality, it was nothing but big talk. He said he was Shinmon Benimaru, and because of that, his subordinates apologized. On the other hand, the vanishing fake mentioned that Benimaru was actually stronger than what humanity thought was the strongest, so Benimaru replied that next time, he hoped he would get a copy that was truly equal to his strength. Nevertheless, that was the end of his fight, so he looked at the giant eye and said that Shinra would take care of the rest. In the next scene, the brothers Sho and Shinra were flying toward the giant eye. Sho said it was their turn now, and that mankind's despair wouldn't end as long as the googly eye existed, which made Shinra realize that it was actually Adolla. Sho added that it was also a thought given form from thoughts of despair and madness. So while they could see that eye existing there, at the same time it also didn't exist. Shinra was puzzled by what his brother said, and what he understood was that as long as the eye was there, the cataclysm wouldn't stop. It was supposedly the origin of humanity's despair, and they would extinguish it. When they were close to the eye, Sho touched it, and his brother told him that when he was on the brink of straying from the path, and was always being called a demon, his heart became in place because of him and their mother. He asked Sho to guide him one last time, and called him his guardian angel. Sho said that Shinra should leave it to him, because that was the reason why he was there. In the next scene, they were gradually entering the eye, and Sho said that Haumea and the other pillars were inside, and they would be entering the world of perception, so they might not be able to return. Shinra said that he had already disintegrated into microscopic particles, and now he would be entering the world of perception, so he thought he was used to doing the impossible by now. They were about to enter Adolla, and when they did, Shinra was alarmed, and his eyes widened. He saw a massive tornado, where some buildings were swallowed, while others were completely destroyed. There were also lightning, so Shinra couldn't describe what he was seeing, while Sho said that it was the history of humanity's despair. According to Shinra, everything seemed off, and that was probably the world before the cataclysm. Sho said that mankind's history always followed the path of despair, like anger, hatred, anxiety, artificial destruction, and natural disasters, and now, the image of despair was trying to fuse with their world to destroy it. They needed to stop it, and Shinra agreed. They were in a place where everything was black, and Shinra was puzzled by that place. After they landed, Shinra said that it seemed he had been there before. Sho said that when they were connected by the Adolla link, they were in that space. According to Shinra, Iris and the other pillars were there, and the pillar in front of them looked like Amaterasu. When they got closer, Sho mentioned that perhaps that image was projected by humanity's subconscious while they were making Amaterasu. Someone said indeed, and they as people always acted according to God's plan, which alarmed Shinra. It seemed he knew who it was, and we learned that it was Haumea. She said they were patiently waiting for Shinra, the savior, and the fate of the world rested on his shoulders. Shinra asked if that was really the real Haumea, and Sho said that was what Haumea was like before. Shinra was puzzled by Sho's mention of the word before, so he explained that Haumea was born a saint, but was corrupted by the putrid thoughts of humanity. She was probably the only person who could handle the collective unconscious of all of humanity's sins. On top of that, Haumea's hearing was the divine revelation of God. According to Haumea, she used that crown to block her vision, but she was always listening, both to humanity's unconscious and to God's revelation. and now she said she had gained a new understanding, which shocked Shinra. When Haumea removed her crown, he was even more shocked, while Haumea said they should end that world together. We learned that Haumea had closed her beautiful eyes until the promised day. She closed herself off from the light, and in exchange, she received the divine revelation of God. She sought the light that dwelt deep within the darkness, and eventually, the filthy emotions of people flowed into her, but she just kept her eyes closed and endured it. When she opened her eyes, she realized that her eyes were looking at Earth, at the subconscious of that planet. When Haumea's pure eyes finally opened, the first thing she did was shed a tear, and it was for the sake of the warrior who fought for her until the bitter end, and she offered her praise to the light at the end of the long darkness. Then, we returned to the present. Haumea called the destined brothers, who looked extremely shocked to see her whole face. Her eyes were full of compassion, and it seemed that sorrow had soaked up everything around it. On the other hand, the brothers who were capable of stopping time were captivated by Haumea's compassion, so they were frozen in their positions. In the next scene, Haumea called Inca and Sumire and told them to come to her. Even though Inca could already see the ill fate for herself in the hand offered to her, she still took it without hesitation, and because of that, she was gradually being consumed by fire along with Sister Sumire. Shinra was alarmed by this, and he saw Inca screaming in pain until some parts of her body turned to ashes. We learned that a person's death is both despair and salvation. Simultaneously, Sister Sumire was expressing gratitude, and they completely died. Haumea seemed very proud of that event, and Shinra asked her how she could do that. We learned that Haumea was the one who was most saddened by that event, and that truth was undeniable. Then, Shinra asked again how Haumea did that to her own allies, so she answered that death was the only true salvation. However, Shinra didn't want to accept that answer, because Haumea couldn't just decide that. According to Sho, his brother was right, but only a god had the power to justify such an inconsistency. Absorbing all of mankind's collective unconscious, all of mankind's creations, the gods throughout history, at that moment, that was the type of god Haumea was, and behind her, the evangelist could be seen. Shinra mentioned that at last it had shown itself, while Sho said that the evangelist was the entire collective unconscious given form. Shinra seemed to have doubts about this, so Sho explained that the collective unconscious was a shared consensus of all of humanity's unconscious. The evangelist was supposedly that very unconscious, and it was the materialization of the secret desire within humans. The true form of the evangelist was the despair they saw on their way there. Haumea said that Sho was right, and as a saint, she became a receptacle for humanity's collective unconscious. But what was the evangelist? What was the unconscious? And she said she knew the answers. What Haumea said was just the truth, and the brothers knew she wasn't lying. Shinra asked what the answer was, so Haumea said that the final point of imagination at the end of evolution was humanity's desire for its own extermination. God supposedly didn't create humanity, because humanity created God from their despair, and God gave birth to even more despair. But what was God? Shinra answered that it was the Sun God, and Haumea said that was correct, like religion, friends, information, science, art, culture, and family. God was supposedly anything as long as it provided salvation, but humanity's history on the other side of that salvation was war, slaughter, accidents, disasters, and sickness. So many despairs were born. Because of this, humanity learned from those despairs, so they acquired ethics, values, medicine, technology, and laws. Civilization advanced, the value of people's souls increased, and they managed to keep death at bay, so they earned safety. But did they really earn it? Sho was puzzled by what Haumea was saying, and she added that the safer humans got, the stronger their salvation became. Death became more frightful, the fear in people's hearts grew stronger, and despair became even stronger. So what did they think came next? Shinra seemed to know what it was, and Haumea said that what came next was the Great Cataclysm. Then, she asked Shinra in order to stop the cycle of salvation and despair, is there any true salvation other than death? Haumea said that nowadays, it was completely normal to help a person in danger, because the stronger the salvation, the stronger the despair. Shinra needed to understand that because he was a fire soldier. The cycle of salvation and despair was brought by fate itself, and the only way to escape it was death. Shinra seemed nervous while listening to Haumea, but he said no way that death was the only salvation, because it was impossible that everyone wished for that. Haumea replied that on the surface, that was correct, but what about the depths of people's thoughts? Even people who held life in high regard and hoped for salvation still chose death. Shinra was shocked by this, and Haumea added that Amaterasu supported the revival of humanity and its prosperity. Then, she used two women as examples, whom she called the very life force of mankind. And yet, they discovered that cycle and accepted it, because nothing lasts forever in that world. In the next scene, the two women Haumea was referring to were shown, Amaterasu and Sister Iris, with their bodies pierced by giant spikes, appearing lifeless. Shinra couldn't believe what he was seeing, while Haumea said that Iris had accepted the salvation of death that she offered to her. According to Shinra, Haumea should stop making it sound good, because she killed Iris, and it was clearly visible that he was seething with anger as he said this, which worried Sho. Shinra immediately charged after that, and tried to kick Haumea, but his attack had no effect. She asked him what he was going to do, and if he would kill her. He replied that was exactly what he would do, and he would end that stupid cycle. Because of this, Haumea asked him if he understood now that salvation could be achieved through death. Shinra's eyes widened because he knew Haumea was right, while Sho was trying to stop him because he was just playing into the hands of God. Shinra stopped momentarily and asked Haumea how dare she kill Iris, and told her that he would never forgive her. At that moment, he looked at Iris again, so he started to tear up, while Haumea asked if Shinra was always motivated by rage and revenge, and she said that his rage about his family being taken from him would not be erased until he killed her. Then, Sho told his brother that he shouldn't lose himself to anger, so he should look at him, because he was with him now. Nevertheless, Shinra was still seething with anger, because he was still thinking about Iris's death, and he was recalling various memories with her, like when she flexed at him, their time looking at sunflowers, and when she thanked him for his concern. Shinra's chest tightened because of this, and he was having difficulty breathing, so Sho was telling him that he must not allow himself to be swallowed up by anger, and he should just calm down. Anger was supposedly the best trigger to bring out death and despair, and Shinra agreed. Sho continued to calm his brother down and encourage him. According to Haumea, the relief after achieving revenge might suppress the anger, but the feeling wouldn't truly disappear. Nevertheless, Sho said that his brother wasn't just fighting for revenge, but also for the sake of human lives, and that fight wasn't for revenge, because it was to protect all of humanity. Shinra said it was for their remaining allies, and according to Sho, it was time. He drew his sword and used his powers. Then, he asked Shinra if he could still move even though he had used his power, and he replied of course, because after all, they were brothers. They charged at Haumea together, and Sho said they should finish it, while Shinra shouted that it was for their comrades. Haumea just stood there, not even flinching, and from another angle, we can see that their attack didn't hit, which shocked them both. They retreated after that, and Haumea asked if they did something. On the other hand, the brothers were still shocked about their attacks, because they were the only ones who could move during stop time, and yet their attacks didn't reach her. Sho said that he had attacked Haumea when time was stopped, and so did his brother, so he asked what Haumea had done. She replied that she did nothing, because her existence was there, and just there, just like how despair always exists. However, Shinra couldn't accept that, and asked Haumea what she had done. According to Sho, the only thing that could make that happen was Inka's ability, while Haumea said that she now had the souls of the other pillars. And of course, that included Sister Sumire, and she was using her powers as she said this. The brothers were thrown back because of this, and they couldn't stand up immediately due to the strength of the attack. Shinra was even having difficulty breathing, while Haumea was asking him if he preferred to die instead in place of her, because either way, despair would come to the world all the same. In the next scene, Shinra attacked her again using his boosted kick, but it just passed through her body, which annoyed him, and he said that he knew his attack should have hit. Haumea didn't answer anything, while Shinra attacked again, hitting Haumea with rapid kicks, who said it was useless, because fate itself had decided that she couldn't be touched. Shinra replied that it didn't make sense, so Haumea should stop saying nonsense. However, Sho told him not to be rash, and in the next scene, Haumea touched the floor. She used an attack that sent the brothers flying upward, and when they fell, the pain was clearly visible on Shinra's face. Then, he asked if the world would fall into despair if he died, even if they defeated Haumea, so what should they do? Sho replied that for starters, Shinra should calm himself, because his despair or death would surely trigger a greater cataclysm that would destroy the world. The only one who controlled the end of the great cataclysm was Shinra, because he was the savior, and Haumea had no say in it. Shinra said that he wouldn't die, and he wouldn't be swallowed up by rage, but he would stop Haumea. He said he would fight for the sake of humanity, and as he was saying this, he was attacking again. He used a devastating axe kick, and said that his death wouldn't be fated by the likes of Haumea, while Sho said that they needed to surpass her. At that moment, their attacks passed through again, and Haumea shook the entire place. The brothers were again thrown back and fell because of this, and Shinra said again that it was for the sake of his comrades. However, Haumea asked him if he had managed to protect the people most important to him. Shinra remembered Iris because of this, so his anger and fury returned, which prompted his brother to calm him down again. Haumea added that the flames of rage would only be extinguished by the death of the enemy, so Sho called out to his brother, but he said it was okay. Shinra also mentioned that revenge would make him a devil, while according to Haumea, it was also true that Shinra became a hero because of the very flames of vengeance. Perhaps, at that time, Shinra was hiding his actions and claiming a so-called sense of justice, because that sounded nice. Haumea's words didn't bear hostility, and Shinra knew it was absolute justice, and all that righteousness did nothing but frustrate him to his core. He then said he was a fire soldier, not a devil, and he was fighting for the sake of saving people's lives. However, his words were as weak as a small fish trying to climb a waterfall. Their weight couldn't be compared to the words of God who stated the consensus of humanity's subconscious. Humans persisted in living purely by facades and lip service, and that pretense was often the opposite of their true feelings. People were originally savages who were true to their instincts, and that was suppressed by the advance of civilization. What might Shinra's true feelings be? And the answer to that was extremely simple and awfully instinctual. The answer was that Shinra wanted to kill Haumea, and his salvation only existed in the death of the saint. Even though Shinra understood that that wasn't true salvation, he still felt that he needed to kill her. Shinra's fire grew stronger after that, but Sho was stopping him, because that was exactly what Haumea wanted. Nevertheless, he told Sho not to worry because he wasn't angry at all, but Haumea rebutted him, calling him a terrible liar. Shinra argued that he would fight to protect everyone, so Haumea asked him how he would protect himself. At that moment, a large hole appeared in Shinra's stomach, while Haumea was saying that his death would complete the great cataclysm, which would bring salvation to humanity. Shinra fell after that, which worried Sho a lot, while Haumea said that that brings a close to the despair that could only end in death. However, Sho argued that it wasn't over yet, because the world that his brother and Company 8 had protected wouldn't end just like that. Haumea replied that the world would return to flames, now that the savior was gone, so Sho told her to be quiet. At that moment, Sho was suddenly surprised, because Shinra grabbed him, saying he was okay, and it could be seen that there was a snake made of flames coming out from the hole in his torso. Haumea said that it seemed there was someone on Earth influencing the place through an Adolla link, while Shinra seemed to know who or what that snake of flames was. Then, we returned to Earth, where someone burning was shown to us. It was Captain Kyoko Huang, and she said that Shinra's wound had been healed because of the stigma she had received from treating him before, and behind her, Hibana and one of her subordinates were worried. She added that it seemed those flames weren't safe for a person like her to touch, and her entire body was completely burned. Her subordinate screamed in grief, but Hibana told her that she couldn't touch those flames. She also pleaded with Shinra to return with Iris, and he was shown saying that he could hear Captain Huang, Captain Hibana, and Lieutenant Agu, and he could tell what was happening on Earth. They were the reason why he had reached that point, and as he was saying this, Sho called him, so he told him not to worry, because he wouldn't be swallowed by rage anymore. He said he wasn't a devil because he was a hero and he was fighting to protect the lives and assets of citizens. He looked at Haumea with extreme focus and approached her, who still wasn't moving. He tried to punch her, and even though his punch didn't hit, it had an effect on Haumea. Her hair moved, and she said that Shinra's efforts were futile because fate itself had concluded that she couldn't be touched by him, and it was set in stone just like the despair of that world. However, Shinra replied that he didn't think so because he had moved Haumea's hair, so it was clear that he could influence her in some way. Because of this, Sho realized that if his brother couldn't interact with Haumea, he wouldn't have been able to move her hair, so the future wasn't decided yet. Shinra said that death didn't need to be the conclusion of the subconscious, so Haumea asked what he wanted to achieve if he could barely move a little bit of hair. According to Sho, it wasn't like that, because just like how the flap of a butterfly's wings could cause great storms, even a gentle breeze could bring great change. Shinra added that that was the reason why the evangelist feared the change he could bring. After saying this, he tried to attack Haumea again, but she just threw him back again and said that the evangelist wasn't afraid and accepted everything. Shinra replied that that wasn't true, but Haumea insisted it was. She told Shinra to look at Earth, because the last flame of despair would be lit. This shocked Shinra, who asked what Haumea was talking about. Then, we returned to Earth, where Company 8 was escorting people, and Maki told Obi that they were finishing the evacuation of that area. Obi replied that it was great work, and now, they just needed to trust Shinra and wait. At that moment, a blind old woman passed in front of him, so he helped her. The old woman said that even though her vision was blurry, she could tell that Obi was brimming with light, so Obi replied that it was to help everyone not lose sight of hope. On the other hand, Vulcan said that the fires in that area seemed to have subsided, so Licht ordered him to check the status of the living facilities inside the shelter. If they had managed to get all the remaining people into the shelter, but before he could finish, he was puzzled about something. He asked Obi if anything had happened, but he said no, and that he had just gone there to check the place. Licht mentioned that there was no problem there, and in the next scene, Vulcan reported to him that there was running water again in the shelter, and he had more news about the generator, but he asked if anything had happened. Licht replied that Obi was just there, but why would that be? Because he was supposed to be guiding the evacuation. Then, we returned to Obi, and Maki reported to him that she had finished the evacuation on her side, so he praised her. There was only one job left, but Maki was surprised, because there are two Obis in front of them. The fake Obi pulled out a knife, and in the next scene, he slit the throat of the real one, causing blood to come out from his neck and mouth. Tamaki screamed in shock because of this, and it seemed Shinra sensed it too. It appeared that Obi had completely died because of this, so Haumea mentioned that the light was gone, while Sho was restraining his brother, who was filled with rage and wanted to kill Haumea even more. It seemed like Shinra was being consumed by his anger again, so Sho was telling him not to let it consume him. As Captain Obi's blood continued to flow, Haumea said that with this, the world reaches its salvation. When her tear hit the floor, the flames grew stronger, while Shinra seemed about to explode from the anger filling his body, and that's exactly what happened. In the next scene, we returned to Earth, where the entire place was rumbling, and the flames of Adolla had reached it, surrounding the people. This included Lisa, Vulcan, and Licht, who was telling Joker that it looked like the world would end like this. We can see that Joker was watching this happen from the top of a building, and he called out to Burns, who said that humanity's future looked as good as gone because Shinra was consumed by rage. Joker replied that he had seen it too, so he asked Shinra if this was how it would end. Before long, they too were surrounded by flames. Then, we moved to where Captain Obi died, and Tamaki and Hinawa were crying from sadness. Maki was the same, and Hinawa couldn't believe it happened, saying it was impossible. Like other people, they were also surrounded by flames, until all that could be seen in the area were the tops of the tall buildings. It had reached Asakusa too, causing chaos among the residents there who were asking what had happened, while for others, they were already dead. Because of this, someone called Benimaru, who put down a bottle of sake, and told his companions that it was sake time. Shinbita and Conro were puzzled by this, saying it was an emergency, and they needed to evacuate everyone quickly to higher ground. Nevertheless, Benimaru suggested that Conro look at the sky, which he did, and he saw that the fires were coming from there. Benimaru said they had nowhere to run on the entire planet, and they had no choice but to leave everything to Shinra from that point on, which made Conro laugh, and he agreed with Benimaru. In the next scene, Benimaru flew using several pieces of matoi that he made into a flying raft, and he shouted to the people of Asakusa that it was time to drink, so they should prepare their sake, and he didn't care if they can't hold their liquor. The people were surprised by what he was doing, and he added that with what was happening to the world, even he couldn't save them, so he apologized. However, the people of Asakusa didn't want him to apologize for that, and said it was okay. While drinking sake, Benimaru said that it didn't mean he would leave the people of Asakusa because he would stay with them until the end of time, which made Conro smile. He said they should enjoy the show to the fullest, so they all shouted, celebrating as if the world wasn't about to end at that moment. In the next scene, Benimaru had descended to the ground, and he asked Conro if he wanted to drink sake. Conro replied that Benimaru had turned the fear of the people into a party in an instant, and he had become a very charming man. According to Benimaru, if it weren't for Asakusa, he would probably have been raised as a flame-wielding monster, so he owed it to Conro and his predecessors, which is why he thanked him. Conro drank the sake, while Benimaru said they should accompany their predecessors one more time. Then, they both raised their cups while being surrounded by flames. In another place, at a high location, Yona and another white-clad member were watching the flames engulf the world. Yona said that the time had come. Extinction was on the way, and with it, the acknowledgement of humanity's secret desire to return to the sun would truly be realized. Because of this, the birth of the second sun would begin, and as he was saying this, he too was being surrounded by flames. He added that he would also return to the flame of Adolla, and in the next scene, it was shown that the entire world was surrounded by fire. The Great Cataclysm was complete, and flames engulfed the world, which became a sun. Then, we were informed that the surface temperature of the sun, which is mostly composed of hydrogen, is about 6,000 degrees Celsius, and in addition to that, the outer layer of the sun's atmosphere, called the Kurono, is over 1 million degrees Celsius. The arching gas, bromine, that emanates from the Kurono also has a heat of 10,000 degrees Celsius. The second sun was born, and the planet of water became a star of fire. Sho was saying that it was all over, and he apologized to his brother because all he could do was stand and watch. Meanwhile, Haumea said that the earth had become a sun and had become one with Adolla, and they were supposedly the last 3 people on earth. Nevertheless, according to Shinra, he wouldn't let Haumea off the hook so easily after what she had done, because he would kill her with his own hands. Haumea said that humanity's hopes had been fulfilled, so Shinra should grant her the salvation of death. Shinra grew even angrier at her, rushed at her, and told her to be quiet. At that moment, there was an extremely bright light shining from beside the earth, and someone called Shinra a fool. Suddenly, something hit him on the head, and the impact was felt throughout the area. Sho was surprised by what happened, and Haumea was speechless, while Shinra asked what it was. The one who did it was Arthur, who asked Shinra if he had forgotten his promise, and called him a devil. Shinra was shocked to learn it was Arthur, and Arthur added that he had said he would give Shinra 3 chances, so Shinra shouldn't say he had forgotten. Shinra made a promise, and that's what he said when they entered Company 4. Arthur had even asked him if he was a hero or a devil, and told him he would cut him based on his answer. On the other hand, Haumea only then realized it was Arthur, Shinra's guardian, while Shinra said everyone in the 8th was dead, and it was his fault. With tears in his eyes, he asked Arthur what he should do, but Arthur just hit him on the head again with Excalibur, and said he couldn't whine at a time like that. Shinra replied that at such a time, all he could do was whine, so Arthur raised his weapon to hit him again, causing Shinra to cover his head. Arthur said that Shinra couldn't just give up, and even if all the people in the world were in despair, Shinra was the one who couldn't give up. Then, he asked him if he knew why, and Shinra answered that it was because he was a hero. Arthur was pleased that Shinra knew the answer, and it seemed that Shinra had regained the right composure to fight Haumea again. Shinra said that no matter what happened, he wouldn't give up. He wouldn't give up even if humanity thought their solution was despair, Because what kind of sad excuse for a hero would he be if he gave up? It was clearly visible on his face that his confidence had returned, and Arthur said that in truth, Shinra was a pain in the ass. Then he asked Excalibur if he was right. It goggled and just said the word fool. Because of that, Arthur mentioned that it seemed true that a weapon bound with strong feelings would develop a soul, but Excalibur just replied again with the word fool. At that moment, the hero faced the saint, and Sho remained speechless as he watched. Haumea said that no matter how much Shinra persisted, they were the only ones left in the world, so what was he going to do about it? Shinra replied that the unconscious of humanity and Haumea's thoughts were irrelevant to the outcome, and since he didn't want the world to end like that, he wouldn't allow it. Sho was pleased with his brother's newly found confidence, who said he is hope. At that moment, something began to appear behind Shinra, causing him to turn around to see what it was. His eyes widened at what he saw, because it was a demon, and he recognized it as his mother. In the next scene, we go back to the past, to the house of the Kusakabe family. Shinra's mother was there, watching him read a book while humming. She was smiling at him while cooking fried rice. At that moment, Sho woke up, so Shinra greeted him, and also told their mother that Sho was awake. Mari replied that if that's the case, it's lunchtime, and they will eat soon. Then, Shinra approached his mother very excitedly, but Mari didn't know why. Shinra frowned because of that, and asked Mari if there was anything he could help with. Because of that, his mother instructed him to set the table, so he did it. He carried the plates to the table one by one very seriously, and his mother praised him for his plating arrangement, a table for 3. After that, Shinra sat down, while Mari was thinking that Sho couldn't eat regular food yet, so she just put a bottle of milk on his plate. The Kusakabe family started eating, and Shinra and Mari said, "Let's eat," at the same time, so Sho tried to imitate them. Then, Shinra devoured the food his mother cooked, and it was visible on his face that he was really enjoying it. Mari told Shinra to chew his food properly, and Shinra replied to his mother that it was really delicious. Then, his mother thanked him because he was always there to help, so he said that he would always keep his mother and Sho safe since he was a hero. At that moment, there was news on their radio that there would be a solar eclipse at 5:07 p.m., where the sun god would temporarily disappear, so it was recommended that people stay at home. Shinra heard that, so he asked his mother what a solar eclipse was. She answered that it's an event where the moon covers the sun, and the sun god would disappear briefly, so they should stay at home. Shinra understood that, so he mentioned that it sounds troublesome, and told Sho not to worry. Then, he went to their glass door, where he sat while looking up at the sky. Because of that, his mother asked him what was the matter, and he answered that he was guarding to prevent the solar eclipse from entering, so that his mother wouldn't worry. Mari said that the solar eclipse would happen later that night, so Shinra shouldn't say he would stay up until that time. According to Shinra, a hero never gives up without a fight, so his mother playfully poked his cheek and said she would leave the guarding to him. She left, and he was left guarding the sky. As time passed, Shinra gradually became sleepy, so he rubbed his eyes, and his consciousness awakened again. In the next scene, his mother called him to rest, but she saw that he was fast asleep. She approached him and saw that he was drooling. His mother left him there, and in the next scene, it was announced on the radio that the solar eclipse would occur shortly, so they should avoid going out unnecessarily. At that time, Sho was crying, so Mari was rocking him, while asking what was wrong, and if the solar eclipse was that scary. Mari told Sho not to worry while continuing to comfort him. On the next panel, Shinra woke up because of his brother's continuous crying. He removed his sweater and put on a cape, making him look like Superman. His mother saw him and seemed surprised, but he stepped on his cape and fell down. Nevertheless, he told Sho that everything was alright because Shinra-man had arrived to save the day. Both Sho and Mari fell silent because of that, and Shinra repeated that Shinra-man was there. Mari and Sho looked really surprised, and then Mari suddenly laughed, asking Shinra what he was doing and if Shinra-man was okay. Shinra also laughed, and Sho saw that, so he laughed too. At that moment, Shinra saw the solar eclipse, and the sun was almost not visible. Then, Mari hugged Shinra and asked him if the eclipse was beautiful, but Shinra didn't answer and just smiled. In the next scene, we return to the present, where the brothers were shocked to see their mother. Shinra remembered something about the past, and realized that the hand they saw in their Adolla link back in the nether was their mother, while Sho ran towards her and hugged her tightly while crying. His mother hugged him too, while Haumea said that now that the world has ended, why has the doppelganger of the evangelist, Mari Kusakabe, appeared? Shinra called his mother, and she called him and Sho in return. However, there was no reaction on Shinra's face, which made Sho wonder. His mother was the same way, and she asked Shinra what was wrong. He apologized to her because in the past, he had failed to keep his promise 12 years ago when the fire occurred. He failed to protect his mother and Sho, so his mother asked him if he had given up. He shook his head and answered that he never gave up, but actually, he was about ready to give up earlier. But if he did that, Arthur would just yell at him, referring to Arthur as he. Mari wondered who her son was referring to, while Shinra asked her if he had grown up. He said he also had new friends, and he wanted his mother to meet each one of them. From his cool superiors and seniors, and his boisterous and dependable peers, to the classy nationalist folks who were always training him, he made a lot of friends. Mari asked if that was so, and Shinra added that he also went to Asakusa and was influenced by their way of speaking. Sho was smiling while watching the conversation between his brother and mother, and Shinra said that regarding the man he mentioned earlier, his mother hadn't met him yet, but he was his friend. Mari seemed pleased that Shinra had made friends. Shinra noted that one should stand shoulder to shoulder with them, and since the friend he mentioned never gives up, then he shouldn't give up either. Even though all his friends were gone, he still wanted his mother to meet them. Mari gave him encouragement, which boosted his confidence. Because of what she's seen and heard, Haumea realized that Shinra will not give up yet. So she said that hope was the curse that tormented them, but people still clung to it, and that was the reason why they were devils. Shinra replied that his mother wasn't a devil, but Haumea reasoned that Mari was the doppelganger of the evangelist, the symbol of despair and mankind's salvation. She said Mari was just the stain of hope in the midst of that despair. Shinra asked if that was so, and he said he guessed that might be the reason why he felt so hopeful at that moment. In the next scene, Haumea released shockwaves, but the brothers withstood them. Sho told their mother to stand back, and Shinra said it was just a breeze. Then, Shinra charged forward, and while attacking, he said that Haumea should just blast enough gusts and maybe she would knock him down someday. Haumea replied that she could do more than just small gusts. Shinra attacked again with a kick, but he was stopped by a force field, which surprised him, and he asked if that was Iris's divine protection. Haumea answered that it was impossible to create just a breeze using that, and all possibilities were gone. She added that Amaterasu was now hers, as well as its light of madness. She used that very light and released a large blast that threw the brothers back, and it was strongly felt throughout the area. Because of that, Sho used his powers to stop time. At that moment, there was another extremely powerful explosion, and Haumea said that all the brothers could do was stop time, and time leaves them with an eternity of despair. On the other hand, Shinra was thinking that he couldn't fight against Inka's prediction and Iris's divine blessing, so he asked himself what he could do. He couldn't think of anything to do except one thing. He said he had tried everything he could, so Sho asked if he was giving up. He told Sho that he wasn't giving up yet, and he explained that Haumea wasn't lying, because it was true that the only thing that had brought him to this point was the flames of revenge. However, he said it wasn't about revenge, because he just wanted to keep his promise to Sho and his mother, because he cared about them. He said he only reached that point because of the two of them, so he told them to take his hand. He said their hearts and souls would become one, and Mari seemed pleased with that. Sho asked her what was going on, and she told him that in the past, Sho was so small and cuddly, but now, he was the one carrying her. She said they had both grown so much, which made them smile, and Shinra said it was a miracle to him that the two people he thought were dead were still alive, and when a family is united, even miracles can happen. Situated third closest to the sun, there was a watery planet. But now, in its place, there is a second sun. Nothing remains of what once thrived on that planet. Only black flames remain there, and despair. That fate was the result of people's unconscious desire for despair on this planet. And the duty of the saint was to ensure that the revelation of God would be fulfilled until the end. The Kusakabe family held hands when Shinra declared that they could create miracles. However, Haumea was crying and said it was pitiful because they were opposing the revelation of God and the unconscious. And that was because of their relentless plot against it until the end. Because of that, they were the devils. Sho questioned what his brother was planning, and even Shinra was still thinking about it. Though Sho didn't want to admit it, they were now in a desperate situation. Shinra remembered what Haumea said, that their mother was the doppelganger of the evangelist. And he knew the saint wasn't lying. He thought about the evangelist's despair and his mother's hope. The fact that she appeared meant there was still a sliver of hope remaining. Nevertheless, Sho asked what else they could do about it. Shinra looked at the evangelist and asked why she was always standing behind the saint like that. Sho also piqued and said that the saint and the evangelist were one and the same. She carried the despair on her back. Shinra then called his brother Sho and their mother. If that was the case, then they would carry hope in their hearts. The angel represented by Sho, the hero Shinra, and the hope of their mother would come together. Inside Shinra's heart, their three souls would unite as one. Haumea was puzzled by his plan and was shocked when something unusual happened to the three. And that was soul resonance, or the merging of their souls, or the unification of their family. A huge circle with the symbol of Shinra's awkward smile could be seen as the product of this. It thundered in that place while Haumea just observed. The devil horns appeared, until Shinra finally revealed himself. He said, "To the planet of black despair." With a heart full of hope, he had come to make himself known. He just smiled, and the Shinra Banshoman was revealed. This was the combined form of Shinra, Sho, and their mother Mari. It had Shinra's face and body with Sho's white hair, along with the demon infernal form trait of their mother. He stated that hope could not be stopped, and he said he couldn't help but smile. Therefore, he challenged to obtain the verdict between hope and despair. Tears flooded Haumea's eyes. The earth was engulfed by the black flames of Adolla due to humanity's hopelessness. But when every living thing there fell into despair, a ray of light and hope appeared. And with that ray of hope that struck his chest, a hero emerged. Shinra again stated that they should determine the verdict between hope and despair. Haumea asked why he couldn't realize that his gentle and sweet hope was what brought suffering to people. Shinra replied that wherever there were tears, he would be there. It wasn't easy to just watch while seeing people cry. Haumea pleaded for him to stop, so she prayed a prayer of despair to bring him down. However, Shinra just smiled and said that such an attack wouldn't throw off his good mood anytime soon. "Is that so?" Haumea replied. She then released an extremely powerful flame that she called the Light of Despair. But he didn't even retreat. Sho said that he should stop time and leave that blast zone. He answered that it wouldn't be a problem. The explosion caused by Haumea was extremely powerful. She said that the end of despair was the consensus of humanity, and she couldn't believe he was trying to change that. Nevertheless, Shinra wasn't even hurt by it, which shocked Haumea. He told her to stop already. But Haumea answered that he should be the one to stop. She told him to look at that planet. She pointed to the earth that had been burned by the black flame. That ending wasn't achieved because of their actions. That was the unconscious desire of all people. Weren't those black flames enough proof? Haumea attacked again and said that was enough. But Shinra just asked if that was all despair had. Sho reminded him not to be carried away. He was becoming thoughtless. But Shinra replied that because they were combined, he should know they couldn't be defeated. Because between despair and hope, of course, hope would win. Shinra made his signature horn hand corner sign. However, Haumea continued to release one attack after another. She was sure that's what he thought, but the earth had already been consumed by black flames. Meanwhile, Shinra just accepted her attacks. Haumea added that the results were already speaking for themselves. But Shinra just replied that everything she was saying was extremely boring, all based on their karma, including the part about results being everything. Haumea couldn't believe his contempt. What did it matter whether it was interesting or not? But Shinra just smiled and said that everything depended on whether it was interesting or not. He spoke to Sho and his mother, saying that at last, he had found the people close to him, and he had managed to catch them. Meanwhile, both Arthur and Captain Shinmon knew how fun it was in that world. Haumea was puzzled by what he called fun. She didn't believe it. But Shinra couldn't accept her saying that everyone wanted to die. He was taught by Captain Shinmon himself. How could she explain the principle of hysterical strength that lies dormant within people? Because if they were okay with death, their survival instincts wouldn't give them power. It was absurd to lump together instinct and consciousness, Haumea said. But Shinra replied that it wasn't that different. Wasn't God full of contradictions? Haumea said that neither she nor the evangelist was God. They were merely the collective existence of human consensus. She was only speaking on behalf of humanity's collective unconscious. She wondered why he couldn't understand that. But Shinra said she's a human. Haumea knelt and just prayed, which puzzled Shinra. Haumea's tears just flowed as she prayed for him to return to the flames of his unholy hope, and that they might be given salvation from despair. Her tears wouldn't stop as she mentioned that she wished she were still human. Suddenly, her tears floated in the air, which puzzled Shinra. Sho could feel that the energy of her soul was leaving with each tear. Those gradually grew and formed something like a large bubble. Sho said that the saint had connected herself to the evangelist completely. According to Shinra, that was the countless consciousness of souls coming together. It thundered in that place, and Haumea's appearance suddenly changed. She developed an extra eye on her forehead and revealed the crying holy girl who was called the Holy Woman of Despair. The unconscious of mankind had become one with the evangelist. The saint continued to cry, with as many tears falling as there were creatures born on that planet. To fight against Shinra Banshoman, Haumea became the despair saint. However, Shinra commented that Haumea wasn't looking too bright right now. When she looked at him, he said that he was there, Shinra Banshoman, so she should stop crying. But she invited him to perish together with her, while releasing black flames to attack him. She told him to embrace those black flames that were offering him salvation. But Shinra destroyed them and transformed them into flowers. Sho was impressed and noticed those sparks. Shinra just smiled and acknowledged it. Haumea couldn't believe what he did to change her flames. She became angry and said, "How dare you?" Black flames surrounded the Holy Woman of Despair, while Shinra just jumped and gained momentum to face her and turn those flames into flowers again. Haumea was shocked and said he was resisting in vain. But Shinra just spun around and released what he called a Shinra Bansho kick, which hit the ground. He turned it into a flower field, which surprised Haumea when she looked at it. Shinra continued stomping his feet on the black flames around them, so Haumea pleaded for him to stop, because those were important to her. Nevertheless, he just stepped on the ground and managed to manipulate the flame to become a flower field. Once again, Haumea pleaded for him to stop and said, "No more sorrow, please." She continued to cry while Shinra urged her to look around. "Wasn't it beautiful?" he asked. She said that light such as that can only be found in a life outside the chain of despair. Was he planning to connect her to such a life? Shinra thought for a moment and remembered something he had seen in Vulcan's workshop. When he recalled it, he imagined it and recreated it. From the water below, an enormous whale with shining eyes emerged. It swam back into the water below. Meanwhile, Haumea continued crying. Sho commented that the whale looked somewhat comical just now. Shinra clarified that he couldn't quite remember its appearance. Haumea declared that he was a devil who continuously created sorrow. And so before the stain could spread further, she would find a way to return him to the flames. She released fire that she targeted at Shinra's body. However, he didn't even dodge. Sho was worried for his brother and told him to watch out, because that divine light would destroy whatever it hit. It was impossible to survive it, and no living being could. Nevertheless, Shinra just caught it with one hand, which Sho couldn't believe. Shinra just stared at it and thought how impressive that energy was. He suddenly threw it into the air, where it exploded and flashed light in front of them, which became clouds. Sho couldn't believe that he had created an atmosphere. The sky darkened and rain gradually poured down, while Haumea continued crying. Shinra just stood there smiling. From outer space, Arthur noticed that the black flames on Earth were gradually disappearing. The tears of the Holy Woman of Despair couldn't be stopped, so Shinra just commented that she should cry in the rain, then smiled. The rain continued to pour, as Shinra and Haumea still faced each other. Shinra said they should rid themselves of despair by her crying it out while it rained. Haumea replied that despair is despair, because no matter how much he tries, it cannot be shed. "Is that so?" asked Shinra, but he pointed that it was her tears that started the downpour after all. Her tears were what strengthened that world. Because of them, the rain poured and the earth became firm. Shinra sat down and touched the ground. As a result, he managed to transform that soil into mountains. When birds flew by, he asked if the Despair Saint was familiar with migratory birds. They travel far, circling the earth depending on the season. She then wondered how far he would take this. Besides birds, giraffes could be seen eating leaves from trees, as well as fish in the water. Shinra said those birds weren't just in Tokyo. They were also on other continents where these migratory birds crossed over. Outside the Earth, Arthur noticed that the Star of Flames had become a blue planet. Meanwhile, the Despair Saint said that he still didn't understand anything. An explosion occurred behind Shinra, destroying the flower field he had created. Haumea clarified that now that the Great Cataclysm was complete, that planet was made into a sun, and yet, he was still trying to repeat the sorrowness that had already stopped. She called him irresponsible with his power because he hadn't yet heard the collective unconscious of humanity. Didn't he mention that she was like a god, but wasn't he the one who obtained the all-creation power and became a god? The meaning of Shinra Bansho is all things in nature or all creation. Haumea added that he was being irresponsible by recreating hell on earth. She called him a devil under the facade of a god. Again, she sobbed while kneeling there. She couldn't stop crying, and when she looked up, she told the Lord that he had once more caused even greater suffering. Although it might contradict herself, but she was still a god. Haumea asked if it was wrong to give equal death and salvation to all things. She wouldn't allow Shinra Banshaman to escape from despair. Shinra couldn't believe what she mentioned about him being a god. Meanwhile, his brother and mother also paused within him. Sho responded that he thought Haumea was right. This wasn't solving anything at all. He used to be a white-clad too, so he could sympathize with the saint's path. Shinra was creating the world as he pleased, but the saint was the one creating despair and thriving in it. If he recreated the earth, the saint would just suffer again, along with all of humanity. So he asked his brother what he truly wanted to happen. Was the goal to try to recreate Eden, he asked. Because if so, even a paradise like Eden would surely fall. Shinra couldn't answer yet. He just stopped and thought. The whale he had imagined and created earlier was gradually disappearing. He then realized that was the despair to which Haumea was exposed. She received endless negative thoughts every second of her life. Even from such an innocent flower, despair was unleashed spontaneously. He realized that even his own thoughts, and so he considered Haumea's situation, how she couldn't find peace because of this. Shinra finally understood that this was what she had been doing all along. Haumea spoke again and said that the hysterical strength he referred to was just another way to escape despair. And the only ones who could do that were the established ones, like him. That was something only the strong could do. She asked if he had ever thought about what it was like to be weak. Being blamed for the death of his family, despite the slander, he had managed to rise and push forward. As a fire soldier who protected the weak and the vulnerable souls. Had he ever thought about the nameless people? Haumea added that the weak didn't know how to fight despair. They didn't see despair, and without acknowledging it, they crumbled. And because they were unconscious, it overflowed into the world. She called him Lord and asked if he wouldn't let the weak escape from hell. Shinra couldn't accept that because, as he clarified, he wasn't a god. But Sho denied this. The power Shinra held belonged to a god. So once again, he asked his brother what he planned to do. Shinra still couldn't answer. Shinra's recreations were shown, the plants, animals, and more, while Haumea remained kneeling in the middle of it all. She said that he claimed he wasn't a god, but creation stemmed from imagination and was what formed the very earth. And that was exactly why Shinra Banshaman had become a god. Using his imagination and the power of God, he had formed all creation. As a result, he had created a new hell. Shinra couldn't accept what she was saying. Did you think that's all hope could offer? He asked. He kept looking forward, which was why he wouldn't take even a single step back. He raised his foot to gain momentum for a kick and told her to watch him. But she replied that for humanity's sake, she would resist until the end. Nevertheless, Shinra was determined. He stood up, and Haumea used the light of despair again, which she directed at Shinra's foot to stop him. But in an instant, various tall buildings suddenly appeared around them, because Haumea's restraint wasn't enough to prevent him from touching the ground. Sho was amazed that his brother could also recreate civilization. Haumea couldn't believe it. The light of despair supposedly traveled at the speed of light, yet he had simply kicked it away like that. Shinra clarified that he hadn't done it in just one kick. He had done it by stopping and reversing time over and over again. Haumea was shocked that he hadn't given up until he achieved this. She was curious about how many times. Shinra just smiled and admitted that perhaps he had been too enthusiastic, which was why some of the buildings started toppling over. But he said he had gone back and forth many times. Nevertheless, it had worked out in the end. Sho commented on his explanation, to which Shinra apologized because he was a bit out of it from doing it so many times. While Haumea stood there, it could be seen that her tears had stopped flowing. Shinra had told her that he believed in the future and wouldn't take one step back. The Adolla burst wasn't just about destruction. It was also the flame of rebirth. Haumea was troubled by the strange thing happening to her tears. She was curious about what he planned to do with them and couldn't believe it what he had in mind. But Shinra wouldn't be stopped anymore. Haumea realized that he planned to return those tears back into souls. Meanwhile, Sho reminded his brother not to forget what he had said. That wasn't the solution. Nevertheless, Shinra just raised his hands, and Haumea's tears floated upward. Back to outer space. The Earth was now shining, and Arthur could feel the breath of life coming from Earth. But he took that back and said it was actually the wavelength of souls. One by one, those tears transformed into souls that returned to that city. People came back to life, including Faerie. He couldn't believe what happened, especially when he saw his fellow white-clad members in the Great Cataclysm Execution Specialist Force. All of them were speechless at what was happening. Even Ritsu could be seen there, sweating nervously. She couldn't understand how they were brought back when the Cataclysm was already complete. Captain Kyoko of Special Fire Force Company 6 was also surprised by what happened. The members of Company 4 were crying and couldn't help but hug each other because of the event. Even Giovanni's bug form returned. Meanwhile, a reporter was live from the scene, not knowing what was happening. In Asakusa, Hibachi returned as well. The people of Asakusa couldn't believe it, while he himself was also clueless. Conro was worried for Benimaru, who said this must be hell. Captain Burns and the Company 1 members were also there, including Joker. Huoyin was happy that everyone had returned, while Kareem was baffled by it. Also present was Raffles Smith, curious about what had happened to the Cataclysm. Even white-clad members like Gold came back to life. The Company 4 members were overjoyed to see Captain Agu among them again, which Ogun and Kareem hugged. Meanwhile, Captain Pan just whistled. One of them couldn't believe that the axe was still stuck in his head. Ordinary citizens who had been brought back could be seen happily reunited with their loved ones. The Company 2 members were there as well, including a clueless Hijiki wondering what was happening. Behind Captain Honda was the white-clad Orochi, who had killed Hijiki. She was thrilled to see him up close and admitted he's totally her type. Not only people were brought back, but also pets and animals. Inka's friends and companions from before she became part of the white-clad returned too. Whether enemies or not, white-clad or Fire Force, they all came back, including Arthur's donkey. At the workshop, even Vulcan's father and grandfather were there, and they thought it was Vulcan's doing. Rekka was reborn as well, along with the children who had been his victims. However, Nataku didn't seem happy about this. On the other hand, Hibana was crying when she saw the sisters from St. Raphael's Convent alive again. Even previous victims of spontaneous human combustion, like Makako's parents and Siko, returned, which delighted the families they had left behind. Also, the first victim shown at the train station, whom Shinra had encountered, also came back. However, Captain Obi was just lying on the ground. But as he slowly opened his eyes, he was greeted by the concerned faces of Company 8. They were overjoyed to see him alive again, and with them, he was also part of the group that happily welcomed him back. Haumea couldn't believe what happened. Didn't she say that history would repeat itself from catastrophe to the next? Even Sho was worried about what his brother had done and questioned if it was okay. But Shinra just grinned at this. The tears of the despair saints stopped again. There are symbols of souls visible in a dark place. And not just one, but 4 of them are there. And those are the pillars that remain in Adolla. Amaterasu mentioned that everyone has been revived. Meanwhile, Iris and Sister Sumire remained quiet. Inka also noticed what happened and said that since they, as pillars, chose to resonate with Haumea's despair, she thinks they should just wait and see what she will choose. Back in the city, Haumea couldn't believe that Shinra allowed humanity's despair to lead to another great disaster. She called it insanity. She said he had escaped that hell, only to return to it. Shinra replied that's where she was wrong. Haumea was curious about what was different now. As long as there is life in that world, she said, one cannot escape the fear of death. As long as there is human consciousness, despair will not disappear. Shinra agreed she was right, which made Haumea ask why, to which he answered that he had made some changes. Haumea asked what changes he was talking about. Meanwhile, while observing the surroundings, Hajiki noticed something strange but couldn't pinpoint what it was. Juggernaut, overjoyed to see him again, quickly ran to embrace him. But when his head hit him hard, it popped off and flew away. While half of his head was on the ground, Hajiki told him to watch where he was throwing his oversized body. Juggernaut called him senpai and couldn't believe what had happened. His head was split, yet he could still speak using the tongue and mouth that remained on his body. Juggernaut was disgusted by this. He was puzzled when suddenly his hand grew larger and fell off his body, causing him to be creeped out by the events. After witnessing that, even Captain Honda questioned what was happening, while Orochi commented how crazy that was. Hajiki picked up his head, and while holding it, wondered if he was dead. He couldn't remember, so he asked if he had died. Orochi confirmed this, admitting that she had killed him. When Hajiki put his head back and fixed it, he seemed to remember that they had indeed met before. That's right, Orochi answered. Hajiki said he wasn't the type of person who was overly concerned with small stuff. And Orochi was the same because she was so into him now. Juggernaut couldn't believe this and asked if not death, what could be called small stuff to him. Orochi and Hajiki then introduced themselves to each other. On the side, Captain Honda was certain they had been swallowed by black flames. Meanwhile, Juggernaut was wondering why his hand kept growing larger, then detaching, then just returning again. They couldn't figure out the answer, so they just accepted it. Meanwhile, the members of Company 8 became concerned when Captain Obi's head suddenly flipped backward. He asked Maki what was happening, and she answered that there was something wrong with his neck. Someone flipped it, while Vulcan taped it with Yu's help to prevent it from opening again. Captain Obi mentioned that when he regained his senses, he indeed felt that his neck didn't fit correctly. Vulcan responded from beside him that they would fix it. The two flexed their muscles and agreed. However, Hinawa couldn't relax because everything seemed too calm. Licht felt the same way and was surprised he wasn't the only one who noticed it. The out-of-place feeling. It was as if the depiction of that world had changed again. And if he had to guess, it was like a world of madness. Back to Haumea, she asked Shinrabanchaman exactly what he has done. He answered that when he rebuilt the world, he reduced the value of life. Haumea was shocked by his statement about reducing the value of life, but Shinra only confirmed it. According to him, he made death a little closer and more intimate. Haumea was confused by his words and gradually closed the veil beside her, hiding from Shinra's presence. While inside, she asked if he thought that would stop her from despairing. Shinra called out to her and said it was up to her to decide whether he should change it again. If she didn't like it, he would kick the world again and reshape it. He smiled and said they should live it over and over. Suddenly, black flames enveloped the two and thundered in that place. Sho was worried because it looked like the Amano Awado, the cave where the goddess Amaterasu had confined herself. He told his brother that she would just choose despair over and over again. Nevertheless, Shinra was confident that wouldn't happen. He looked back, and there was Karen, whom he asked if he was right. Meanwhile, Haumea was still hiding inside when Karen spoke and said it's him. He wondered if she still heard the voice of despair. He knelt before her and said that he, more than anyone else, knew the pain she felt due to humanity's collective unconscious. But he didn't care about people suffering. He wasn't hurt by their pain, but by hers. That's why he wanted to create a disaster as soon as possible to end her anguish. However, he admitted there was one thing he always regretted. He was silent before saying he wished to see her smiling face, even just once. Because deep inside, she was always crying. Just because they were at the climax doesn't mean she should cry max.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Sho couldn't believe his rhyme while his mother commented, "Good one." Karen pleaded that she didn't even need to smile, but he hoped she would give him a chance to just see her face. Haumea didn't answer, just crying while hiding inside. But after a moment, She uttered that Shinra Ban's Homan wasn't fair because he used Karen. She slowly opened the barrier and revealed her blushing face, saying that was cheating. In Karen's mind, she was incredibly cute. He called her name and raised himself to approach her. Tears still filled the eyes of Haumea's extremely cute face as she stared at him. Karen then asked permission to take her from there, and Haumea just blushed. Because of that, he pulled her from inside and carried her. Haumea was visibly embarrassed while Shinra just smiled. Karen was overjoyed to see her again, while she told him not to hold her like a baby. Karen clarified that all of them had been born again, the entire world, including them. He slowly put her down, while Shinra just watched them. There were no absolutes there, but Shinra was certain they wouldn't regret being born again in that world of death. Haumea looked at him as he said they should believe him. Now that Haumea had cast off mankind's collective unconscious, she could finally live. Damn straight, Shinra answered. However, concern was evident on Haumea's face when she asked where all that despair had gone. 3 eyes peered from inside the cloak, staring at Haumea and Karen. It quickly transformed and grew larger and larger, which worried the two. Fear was visible in their eyes due to its presence. Nevertheless, Shinra just jumped in attack, saying there was no place for it in that world. He used his corner hand sign to unleash an intensified explosion when he kicked it. As a result, the overwhelming presence was destroyed and disappeared. Shinra told it to go back to sleep. Because of that, the black flame enveloping them disappeared, and they were greeted by a strange sun smiling in the sky. Now, he said, they could leave and live there. Haumea was on the verge of tears because of the freedom she had attained and the opportunity to live peacefully. Back in Adolla, the pillars were still together. Inka was surprised that Haumea seemed to have chosen to live, so she became curious about what they would do next. Sister Sumire, Iris, and Amaterasu looked at her. Amaterasu said she would disappear along with the despair because she preferred death. Iris protested, but Amaterasu replied that she no longer had any interest in going out there and living at that point. Iris tried to change her mind, saying if anyone should disappear, it should be her as Amaterasu's doppelganger. Amaterasu answered her not to be foolish. She said her eyes were overflowing with hope. She chose to die with Haumea because of her kindness to both of them. Therefore, Iris should live in her place. She suddenly took it back and said Iris should live for both of them. Iris couldn't accept this, saying she was just a fake. When Inka asked Sister Sumire what she would do, she answered that she had already seen the modern age, the world of flames, and the world of death and souls. So, she had no interest in living as a lone human through 3 ages. Iris then bid farewell to Amaterasu and thanked her for shining for all of them for so long. Amaterasu replied that she wasn't fake. She was the me that Amaterasu had wanted to be. Outside, Haumea knelt on the ground and wept again. Her tears didn't last long, as they brought back 2 souls to that world. And they were Iris and Inka. Shinra smiled when he saw the sister, and she did the same. But Inka interjected and said she was there too, which surprised him. Look who came back, said Shinra. Inka replied that she tried to die, but it was kind of lame. Sho then praised his brother because now, everything was settled. But he answered that they weren't finished yet. A black flame manifested again in front of all of them, and it gradually transformed into a large cross with a skull and said it had no reason to let them live. Shinra simply replied that he knew that. Now that everything seems to be resolved, a supernatural being has appeared. It announced that it's time for them to die. Inka protested, saying she had just returned, and so they were advised to stay back. Sho was troubled by the newcomer and asked his brother what was happening. He replied that this was the arrival of a being that the world needed. They were shocked by his use of the word need. But Shinra said that this was God. Sho couldn't believe it because of its frightening appearance. Shinra had manifested it because he thought the idea of worshipping an invisible god was sort of crazy. So, this was the absolute being, the god who would rule death. Sho was extremely shocked by this, while his mother commented on it being a skull. Shinra looked up and called it my lord, saying they were all ready. The being recognized him for his fine attitude and declared now is the time to die. Something then emerged from inside the pillars, which startled them. But Shinra, smiling, said he no longer needed it. The thing removed from them floated away into nothingness, and as a result, Shinra, Sho, and their mother returned to normal. The Shinra Banshoman was gone. The being said they had powers too great for humanity, so it would confiscate them. Sho was troubled by this and noticed that 7 powers were taken, although only 5 of the pillars were present. The being answered that it had already taken the powers of those who weren't there. It wanted to take all 8, however, it seemed the last one was somewhere outside that world. In Asakusa, Konro became concerned when Benimaru mentioned feeling like something had been removed from him. Even Nataku in the city was puzzled, causing Kurono to ask what was wrong. Meanwhile, Haumea flicked Inka's forehead, annoying her. When she asked why she did that, Haumea asked in return how her precognition was doing. She thought about it and said she couldn't see anything. Haumea was also surprised because she could no longer hear others' thoughts. Shinra was also shocked because his pyrokinesis was gone. But it wasn't just them. Even Karen had lost his power. Sister Iris seemed to realize something because of this. Spontaneous human combustion had disappeared from their world. After taking their powers, the being said it would now disappear from their world, so Shinra thanked him for everything. Sho asked where it was going, and it replied, somewhere where a god belongs. It said it would create such a place and go there. It gave them a phone number in case they needed it, 4242564.
Hello, Daddy?
It suddenly vanished after saying goodbye, and Sho waved back. And just as his brother had said, it was indeed a supreme god, although it seemed rather casual. Shinra put his hand on Sho's shoulder and asked, isn't it more fun that way? He asked if Sho had a problem with that, and he replied that he didn't. Their mother praised them both for working so hard. Because of that, she said she was proud of them. However, Sho was troubled by her demon infernal form. Mari knew this and said she didn't look very motherly. However, the world was different now, so they shouldn't get hung up on appearances. Someone then approached and asked if she was Shinra's mother. When she answered yes, Inka introduced herself and pointed to Iris as well. She said they were Shinra's girlfriends. This surprised the sister. Shinra looked at them and asked what she was saying. His mother asked him if it was true that they were both his girlfriends. Shinra denied this, saying he wasn't like that with either of them. His mother couldn't believe it because they seemed like lovely girls. Inka suddenly clung to Shinra's arm and told his mother that it was okay. Since Shinra was the hero who saved the world, he deserved 2 girlfriends. Maybe even 3. She added that she didn't even care if she wasn't his first. Iris also held his other side and asked Shinra if he felt the same way. Shinra just gave an awkward smile before suddenly breaking free from their grip. His mother commented on his smile, but Shinra clarified that it wasn't what she thought. But Shinra knew his face was definitely freezing up. Well, anyway, everything was settled now, so there was no reason to stay there any longer. It was time to find the 8th. Iris agreed with this. When Mari asked what he meant by the 8th, Shinra reminded her of his promise. He said there were many people he wanted to introduce to them. Truly, this was a new world, a world founded on hope. The smiling moon remained in its sky. Shinra had used the help of Vulcan and Licht to build this world. There would likely be many changes compared to before. One of these was the strange animals that were there. Shinra then looked up and thanked the one above for protecting the place he could come back to. He was referring to Arthur, who was watching over the earth from above. He smiled when Shinra said he had returned. So now it was his turn to go home, as he called him friend. Meanwhile, the members of Company 8 stood in line in front of their matchbox to welcome Shinra and his companions. He said, I, 2nd Class Fire Soldier Shinra Kasakabe from Special Fire Force Company 8, have just returned from the fire scene. The flame that consumed the world has been extinguished, and now the human race is safe from combustion. The members of Company 8 quickly ran to embrace him and Iris. Meanwhile, Sho and Arrow just looked at each other. Shinra thought to himself that he wasn't sure when his face stopped being tense. He hadn't noticed that at last, he was smiling normally again. But in truth, he did know. It was the moment when the child they called the devil found hope. It was the day he joined Company 8. The new world was revealed where Juggernaut and Tamaki were strolling around, wearing only casual clothes. Tamaki remarked how difficult it was to believe that towns like this existed other than Tokyo now. Juggernaut replied that before the Cataclysm, the world was even bigger. Tamaki still couldn't fully comprehend that it was so peaceful without human combustion. She then paused when Juggernaut mentioned how happy he was to be on a date like this. Tamaki blushed and said she wasn't complaining. She shared that now that the fire force had disbanded, she was curious about what everyone was doing. Juggernaut was certain they were on an expedition or something. Tamaki mentioned hearing that even though everyone had lost their pyrokinesis, some people were still stronger than before. Unfortunately, Juggernaut replied, that didn't apply to them. Only people with powerful souls were stronger now. The scene shifted to Obi wearing a kimono with death written on the back, staring at the land. Now, he was the general commander of the World Heroes Force. Tamaki couldn't believe that someone like General Commander Obi could now rip up the earth with just one hand. And there were those who were already strong before who became even stronger now. Like Benimaru, the World Heroes Force Supreme Combat Commander, and his Vice Supreme Combat Commander, Sagamiya Conro. Tamaki was then curious about what it meant that they were on an expedition and what exactly they were doing. Juggernaut clarified that their planet no longer had Tokyo. The whole world there was still vast. Hinawa, Licht, and Vulcan were apparently part of the expedition and called the attention of their General Commander Obi. Vulcan said he had found the position of the giant monster that had appeared. Licht described it as a massive serpent 100 meters long, like the one that had appeared the other day. He couldn't believe the world Shinra had created. Because of this, Obi asked where Shinra and the others were. Licht answered that they were scouting ahead, about 20 kilometers out. The scene shifted to Karim and Rekka, who happily met each other. Rekka was pleased to see them and asked if they were off duty. Hoi Yin mentioned that the troops were already on an expedition. When Karim asked Rekka if he was really leaving, he replied that there was a big world that needed to be seen. The path of valor doesn't wait for anyone. On the side, Kurono noticed that he seemed to be leaving, while concern was still evident on Nataka's face. But Rekka waved at him and asked if he would join them, which surprised Nataku. Meanwhile, in a shop, Hibana and Iris were seen talking to each other. When Hibana asked if Shinra hadn't returned yet, Iris replied that he hadn't and was still chasing after her. Hibana smiled and acknowledged that the two of them were close, but she was happy that her idol was popular with so many women. Anyway, he was the hero who revived the entire world, so it was only natural for him to be popular. Iris was surprised by this statement because she thought Hibana liked Shinra. Hibana admitted that he was her idol, and as a true fan, she would allow her idol to get away with anything. Iris thought this sounded a bit twisted, but since Shinra was now everyone's hero, she felt she couldn't keep him just for herself. She also knew there was more to life than love. Hibana added that it was stupid to get worked up over romance. Nevertheless, Shinra was a different story. Iris was surprised by this and admitted she was wondering when he would return, as he had left to chase after a certain woman again. The scene showed Shinra on the expedition with Ogun. At last, he had tracked down the location of the large beast. Ogun couldn't believe it was over 100 meters long, and Shinra commented that it was crazy stuff. Ogun remarked that Shinra had created a hellish world for them. Shinra just smiled at this and asked if that wasn't fun. He suddenly looked for Arthur and Excalibur, and Ogun mentioned they were waiting at the base of the mountain. Arthur apparently had something to take care of. Shinra wondered if they should meet up with him. It was possible he might not return this time if they just left him with it. After all, it had taken him quite a while to return from space. On the other side, Arthur was seen observing with a creature by his side while on a cliff. A massive dragon flew above them, causing Arthur to look up. As he gazed at it, he simply smiled. Finally, Shinra and Ogun caught up to him, asking if he was finished. He replied that yes, he just needed to give a proper hello. Oh yeah, Shinra responded. Arthur mentioned that they would be facing a Hydra next, so they shouldn't get worked up. Ogun commented that the thing was like a nightmare, and Shinra thought someone might die this time. Ogun then asked for Excalibur's opinion, who turned out to be the small creature accompanying Arthur. It replied that it had just seen the Hydra, so it was certain they would die. They would see the face of death until they passed through. Ogun was troubled by this statement, and Shinra commented that it was just like Arthur. Looking toward where there was smoke, Shinra thought their target was curled up on the mountain over there. Because of this, Ogun said they needed to hurry to bring back Deputy Commander Hinawa. Otherwise, Maki and her father would surely light them up. Shinra agreed with this. Ogun asked whether those monsters weren't scattered everywhere now. But apparently even Shinra didn't know what would happen to that world. Therefore, there was no point in worrying about it. Ogun couldn't believe that he was the one saying this. he who created this world. Shinra simply said that's what he does. Suddenly, the woman they were looking for appeared and called them dumb, dumber, and dumbest because they were so slow. The three were surprised by this. The woman said she was worried. She wanted him to chase after her forever. Shinra became annoyed when he saw her, and it turned out to be Inca. When they finally faced each other, she asked Shinra if he had changed his mind. He then asked her if she was the one who summoned the large serpent. Nevertheless, he said he wouldn't give her what she wanted. Inca couldn't accept this and called him extremely stingy. All she wanted was to have his babies. Ogun responded with an ooh la la while Shinra was shocked before saying that he already had Iris. Inca was surprised by his answer and commented that it was gross. She told him not to get the wrong idea because he thinks she wanted to be with someone as boring as him. Shinra was confused because he thought she liked him, to which Inca clarified that all she wanted was his seed. Shinra was extremely shocked and asked if she had gone crazy. It was impossible for him to give that to her. Inca couldn't accept this and said that if he asked licked, he could get it from him very easily. But that's not what Shinra was saying. Again, Inca said she wanted the baby of the hero who saved the world. It's not like he couldn't make more afterward, so he should give her one, as she called him a Scrooge. Shinra wondered why she was so insistent, but Inca replied that he, above all others, should understand. Now that this was a world of death, the value of life had changed. And because of that, she wanted a life that would carry on. Shinra thought for a moment and suddenly asked that if she wanted a world-saving hero, why not Arthur? Arthur got annoyed and said not to involve him in this. Inca responded that it was because he was an idiot. Arthur laughed at Shinra and said it sucks to be him, but Shinra was puzzled by his reaction since he was the one being dissed. Inca added that she had wanted to die before. However, he changed the world, and now she had found a reason to live. He saved her in every sense of the word. So, she wanted to leave descendants with someone like him. So again, she asked if it was okay with him, but Shinra still refused and apologized. Inca was irritated and said he was so lame. Therefore, she might just continue to destroy that world and become a witch until he agreed. She smiled and admitted that everyone was having a blast in the world he created, so she thanked him, calling him a hero. Shinra simply replied, "No biggie." The world was indeed happy now. In one scene, Lisa and Maki could be seen laughing together in a shop, while Burns and Joker were together elsewhere. Sho and Nataku were classmates in a school where Kurono was their teacher. However, instead of listening to him, they were just listening to music using earphones. Meanwhile, Hibachi was with the twins Hinata and Hikage, and Haumea looked absolutely beautiful when she married Karen. 25 years later, the special Fire Cathedral 8 still existed in the New World. Inside was the Supreme Commander of the World Heroes Force, Shinra Kusakabe, now 42 years old. Someone greeted him with a good morning, mentioning that a congratulatory message had arrived from President Obi. Shinra knew he was a busy person, so he appreciated it. They were actually discussing the enlistment of Shinra's child. The man couldn't believe that heroes worried about such things. Shinra remarked that when it comes your child, it doesn't matter if you're a hero. Just then, two young people were at the entrance of the cathedral. Shinra admitted he was somewhat worried because he didn't know what to expect, but he was extremely excited. The faces of the two young people at the entrance were shown as Shinra mentioned that when you live every moment without regret, with everything you have, death is no longer a big deal. He said the lives given to them should be enjoyed like big, idiotic fools. That's what allows their souls to burn bright. In the distant future, a strange image in an unfamiliar place was shown. A skull spoke and thought about a godchild in human shape. It wondered what kind of child that would be. After a moment, it thought about making it resemble the child who saved the world. Suddenly, a little kid appeared before it that the skull greeted with a hello. Another child with a star on his eye and arm was shown about to punch when something was attacking it. Yet another child was shown looking up with the teeth somewhat like Shinra's. The events in that world were depicted in a book being read by parents to their little daughter in their home. The mother said that's how that world was created so it would never again fall into despair. And their daughter was amazed by the story. And thus concludes the epic saga of Fire Force. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through all the story arcs. Stay tuned for more captivating manga to come.